to order the February 28th normal meeting of the Tarpon Springs Planning and Zoning Board. Can I have a roll call?
Mr. Seaman?
Here.
Mr. Kouskoudas?
Here.
Mr. Stavropoulos?
Here.
Mr. Vesey?
Here.
Ms. Vigil?
Here.
Mr. Koulianos? Mr. Andriotis?
All right. Well, we have a quorum, do we not?
Yes, you do.
Yes. We'll proceed to item number 2, the quasi-judicial announcement and swearing of speakers.
Thank you. This is a quasi-judicial proceeding where the Planning and Zoning Board acts in a quasi-judicial rather than a legislative capacity. At a quasi-judicial hearing, it is not the board's function to make law, but rather to apply law that has already been established. In a quasi-judicial hearing, the board is required by law to make findings of fact based upon the evidence presented at the hearing and apply those findings of fact to previously established criteria contained in the Code of Ordinances in order to make a legal decision regarding the application before it. The board may only consider evidence at this hearing that the law considers competent, substantial, and relevant to the issues. If the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has met the criteria established in the Code of Ordinances, then the board is required by law to find in favor of the applicant. By the same token, if the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has failed to meet the criteria established in the Code of Ordinances, then the board is required by law to find against the applicant. At this time, I would ask if any of the board members have had any ex parte communications with any of the applicants. Hearing none, I would next ask if any of the board members believe they have a conflict of interest regarding either application.
Yes, I will be recusing on the first item. I performed some consulting work for the owner of the development several years ago related to the development. So in an abundance of caution, I'm going to recuse for that item.
Okay, and that's on application 21-133?
Yes.
And as we've discussed, I do not believe you have a legal conflict, but the code and the statute do allow for recusal if it is believed to have an appearance of a fair and unbiased proceeding. So when we begin that application, you will hand the gavel to your vice chair.
Okay.
Now, anyone that's going to testify today, if you could please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this proceeding is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you all.
All right. With that, we come to application 21-133, and I'll pass the gavel for this one.
Thank you. Before we begin, I'd ask anybody in the audience to go ahead and, if you have cell phones, please silence them. Thank you.
And I would like to speak to the applicant before we get started just briefly. We do have a quorum, so we are able to go forward with the meeting. However, the applicant should be aware that there are members missing this evening, and you do need an affirmative vote of the majority present. Since the chair is not participating, his vote will not go towards that majority vote. So if you wish to defer this to a later meeting, that is your prerogative, because you can wait for all the board members to be present, but that is your decision. And with that, I will let you guys begin.
Okay. Good evening, Pat McNeese, Principal Planner. This project, Cypress Trails of Tarpon Springs, is coming to you as a proposed preliminary plan development to the residential plan development zoning district. It's located bounded by Spruce Street and North Jasmine Avenue. It was originally proposed as a two-phased project for a total of 95 townhomes. The first phase has been approved. We'll look at the history a little bit on that. And is under construction. That is 36 townhomes. You can see the area it's in. Over here is Flammer Ford. and a medical complex here, the Duke Energy transmission yard here on 19. To the south is Cicadia Cemetery. To the east and northeast is a mix of residential housing, single-family townhomes in this area, proposed single-family here. You've looked at that project a couple weeks ago, last month. And then up north, of course, some mobile home zoning. And this is just a better look at the aerial photograph. This is the total ownership here. Phase 1, again, is under construction with 36 units. There's a large cypress wetland in the center of this property. There's a cypress wetland over here to the west as well. This area in yellow is the Phase 2 area. It's currently occupied by development. It's disturbed and developed. Some of the paperwork submitted by the applicant indicates this was a horse boarding facility. I think there's auto repair going on here, so it's currently developed and disturbed by and large. As far as the uplands, this is an overlay showing just the survey units under construction here. The structures that are on site. There is a pretty substantial Duke Energy easement on the south side, so this property does have some development challenges associated, and as we'll see, the applicant has tried to plan and situate the development around that wetland, still having to stay out of that Duke Energy easement, so it's a bit of a challenge. The request is for rezoning to residential plan development. And we're looking at approval of a preliminary plan development tonight, is what they're looking for the Phase 2 portion. The residential low, medium, future land use map category is what this property is in. It is currently zoned residential multifamily. So the first phase, this was proposed as a 2-phase project in 2014. Ultimately, it was only Phase 1 was approved under the RM zoning. So we'll look at that again in a minute as well. The property, just by straight acreage, is allocated 122 units. And the applicant is proposing to develop 102 units total. So the 36 units have been approved in Phase 1. The applicant would like to add 66 more units in Phase 2. And waivers under the plan development review would be required for the wetland buffer, the yard setbacks, dimensional setbacks, building facade staggering, and the light pole design criteria that you have in your code. So again, this project came in as a 95-unit 2-phase project, and it was originally processed under the RM district. This is just a comparison of the Phase 1 existing standards and the Phase 2 proposed standards that are proposed tonight. There was a variance granted for that entire project to the wetland setback, which at that time was required to be 15 feet, because this was not a planned development at that time. It was a site review under residential multifamily. There was a variance granted to go down to 0 in certain spots for that 15-foot wetlands setback. That variance has now expired. The applicant also received a conditional use approval for the entire project for the yard dimensions. It's called Alternative Dimensional Plan. You guys have seen it a couple times. Under residential multifamily, you can do that. That conditional use has also expired. The only things that haven't, that the applicant basically doesn't have to go back for, the sidewalk on Spruce Street was waived at the time. if you remember, Spruce Street was being reconstructed. Board of Adjustment waived that sidewalk requirement, and that area is now built. And there's a sidewalk on the north side of Spruce Street. There was a vacation of Pine Street to the south, that portion of Pine Street that borders the applicant's property. And of course, that vacation was completed, so that still exists. So the applicant did go to site plan approval for phase 1 only. Phase 2 was withdrawn. We can talk about why if you want to. I believe the applicant, I believe it was mostly inability to resolve some drainage issues, but the applicant may be able to expand on why that was. So phase 1 was taken for approval, site plan approval, and it received that in 2015. The plat was recorded in 2017. The site work was done, plat recorded, and townhomes are now being constructed in that area. So again, just some comparison. For the full project, we had 95 units in the original proposal, and then now we're looking at 102 units. Wetland impacts, we had, yes.
I don't mean to interrupt you.
That's fine, go ahead.
Okay, because I'm looking at the waiver requests.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us what the waiver requests were and what was granted for phase 1?
Yes, there were no waiver requests because it was not a planned development. So, and I will give you a little more information. So they had to get 3 separate approvals in addition to the road vacate. They actually had to get 4 separate approvals for processing this under residential multifamily. They wanted a different wetland setback. They had to get a variance for that because there are no waivers outside the plan development process. They weren't in that process. They had to get a variance for that. That's now expired. And they needed different yard dimensions, which they're asking for tonight for phase 2 to be consistent with phase 1. They needed those too. For that, they had to get a conditional use approval. So those were the 2 things they asked for. The staggering requirement, which we'll look at, only comes in with the plan development, so that wasn't required at the time. And the light pole design didn't exist at the time. The board just passed that a few months ago. So they didn't need waivers for those items back in the first go-round.
So they weren't required back then to get a wetlands setback waiver?
They were required to get a wetland setback variance. Okay. And the reason they're here as a plan development, or one reason is staff advised, they tried to go back in. We were looking at 3 applications again. Staff suggested, why don't we just process this as a plan development so this board and the Board of Commissioners can be the board, because remember, variances go to Board of Adjustment. They don't go to anybody else. Can be the reviewing bodies that review everything at one time, look at it all together, so that the applicant did follow the staff's suggestion. Okay, does that help? Okay, so we've got the full project, no wetland impacts the first go around, and then we do have some wetland impacts proposed here, and then buffer impacts have also increased from that first proposal. These are the waiver requests from the plan development requirement. So these are the setbacks in the residential plan development, and here's what the applicant wants. There's a 50-foot requirement for wetland setback and plan development. That comes in with the plan development. So that was kind of introduced as part of that. Again, previously the applicant only needed to set back 15 feet, so we can talk about that when we get to that. And of course, the staggered effect did not apply before. Plan development wants you to stagger the facades by 2 feet. They're asking that be waived. The current the units that are under construction now are not staggered. Okay, and here is the full development layout with phases 1 and 2, phase 2 in yellow. This is just an overlay of that phase 2 with the showing the development layout on the property, and this is just a little bit better view of the phase 2 layout. So I did indicate, actually, this is the original phase 2 layout. Just shows there were originally going to be, starting here at phase 2 and coming around, 59 units added. These blue areas just kind of show you some of the adjustments that have been made to revise that to 66 units. The next slide shows where the 7 additional units have been added to the proposal. 2 over here to the west, some to the north, and then 1 inserted here along. I think that's Grand Cypress Avenue there. So this is the request you have before you now, this layout here. Just want to kind of point out, because we do have a little bit of discussion about the wetland impacts. If you look at that area that's circled, these are the wetland and buffer impacts in shading that are a part of this. The honeycomb areas are the wetland creation. The applicant is mitigating wetland impacts on the site, which is the first preference by city comprehensive plan on mitigating wetlands. And then the applicant is also establishing some upland buffer reservation to compensate for a lost buffer. There is also some in phase 1. And the applicant is working with the Water Management District on this proposal as well. So looking at that area circled in red, just to give you kind of a concept of what's different, this is the original 59 unit layout showing that the buffer is impacted, the wetland is not. And this just kind of shows some of the, the lots have kind of been reconfigured, retooled, so that we do have some increase, some wetland impacts, which there were none before, and then some increase in buffer impacts. The tree mitigation and landscape plan, this is basically the last version the applicant gave us. We believe that the applicant can comply with the landscaping plan. We believe that the tree mitigation can be met, especially with the on-site planting of cypress. They can recover the inches of tree impact. There's not a lot of trees that you saw. It's a disturbed site. So that would be compliant if we go with this plan. The landscaping just needs more work. The number of trees is there, but the species and layout aren't going to work. But we can work with the applicant on that. I can go into more detail about that if you need to. So with respect to your 6 criteria for review that you used for plan developments, okay? The first one is consistency with the comprehensive plan. The rezoning to RPD is consistent with the residential low, medium, future land use map category. And overall, most of the project is consistent with the requirements of the comprehensive plan as implemented by your land development code. We do have some issue with the wetland and increased buffer impacts. Staff had difficulty kind of justifying those impacts given the proposed layout. They do not seem to be unavoidable impacts. What we're doing is adding 7 lots, and that seems to be resulting in the impacts. That seems to be the sole reason for the impacts. We did not feel that the applicant provided sufficient rationale for why those impacts were necessary or why denial of those impacts would create unreasonable deprivation of use of the property. So we just didn't see the rationale, and the applicant can certainly address that. Physical character of the site, again, this is an upland disturbed site. It seems to be suitable for development. It's already developed. The applicant, again, there's challenges presented by the Duke Energy easement in the wetlands, so the applicant is trying to overall design around those physical impediments. Land use compatibility, again, there's a mix of housing types in this area, the development is oriented away from 19, away from the streets. They're oriented, the entrances and everything are oriented internally. I think this is a pretty good choice for something to be adjacent to Cicadia Cemetery. You're going to get townhomes, limited lots, not a lot of neighborhood activity. They're oriented away, and they're 150, 160 feet, you know, with that easement away from Cicadia. So this will improve, I think, the compatibility with Cicadia over what's there now, the auto repair and kind of mess that's there. Now, I think the applicant would agree. This is an upgrade for that Phase 2 area. Public facilities are being provided to Phase 1, and we have adequate facilities. All levels of service are met with this project. Transportation, we have pretty easy access to Keystone and 19 via Jasmine, Spruce, Mellon Street. The applicant is proposing internal sidewalks all through the development. We're going to carry the sidewalk down North Jasmine, we do have the requirement for the second access, and that is being provided to North Jasmine on that south road. I think it's Grand Cypress Avenue, and that will be an emergency access. And this is very close to the Pinellas Trail, so there's easy access to that as well. Again, for environmental design, just to reiterate, we have direct impacts to wetlands. The buffer width proposed is 0 to 15 feet, consistent with Phase 1, but we do have expanded buffer impacts. So the wetland and buffer impacts are also being mitigated on site. Again, you know, staff agrees that it makes sense to build this development out. We just don't feel we can get there with the proposed wetland impacts, given kind of the almost kind of a straight face test with the comprehensive plan, unless we can hear more from the applicant on what that rationale would be. Again, landscaping is not yet in full compliance, but we can work with the applicant. The numbers of trees are there. We need different species than what's shown if we're going to plant things that close to each other and that close to utilities. So this has to come back for final plan development to the Board of Commissioners, so those details we feel can be worked out. This is a summary of the waivers. There are 5 or 6 criteria for waivers. Anyway, we are, the applicant is primarily citing 3. There are 5 criteria. The applicant is primarily citing 3 criteria for their waivers. Overall, their rationale for this is, hey, we've got Phase 1. We can't deal with the 50-foot wetland setback because you would not be able to carry out the street layout, those types of things, to Phase 2. Staff agrees that the 50 feet is too much, and it's a kind of a switch here. But that being a major rationale for this project is to be consistent with Phase 1. We've got setbacks. We recommend that the staggered effect could be waived to be consistent. The lighting design, the lights are already up on Phase 1 site, and they're very close to the city-required design. The poles are not powder-coated black or green. They're a light color, you know, so applicant would like to just carry that through the development. Makes sense. the addition of the 7 lots, in our mind, alters that Phase 2 enough that consistency with the original just is not a sufficient rationale for that. We would like to see either the 15-foot setback honored or a minimum going back to the 59 lots in Phase 2 and providing only the buffer impacts that are necessary to accommodate the 59. So we have not made a recommendation at this point. Again, we haven't recommended denial because it makes sense to build this out. But we are looking at, some issues with the wetlands. The TRC has reviewed this. This has been there 5 or 6 times. And Phase 1, we would like to see come to closure on some issues on Phase 1, which I've listed here. So that was another issue that the TRC had, and another basis for them not really making a clear recommendation that the review was complete. Now, we have supplied ordinance with recommended waiver language and recommended conditions should this be approved as presented by the applicant. These are the conditions we would recommend. So this is just instructions for you and for the Board of Commissioners that the project can be denied, approved with conditions. The applicant can ask for a deferral if they would need to come back with any changes. I think I'll stop there and ask if there are any questions.
Does the board have any questions for staff?
I have several, but
Okay.
I'm happy to go
Go
after
for it.
someone else.
No, I have some, but I'll let you lead the charge then, since you started first.
Thank you for the presentation, Pat, and all the additional documentation. I had the luxury of reading it earlier, and I thought it was really thoughtful on your analysis. I very much appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I got a whole handful of questions, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to put them in order of the application. Some might just be clarifications.
Okay. Oh, and I should add, because we had printing problems, if you guys remember last time, I have brought full plan sets if we need to look at those. Seems like with our plan sets, they are not printing properly.
Not a builder's.
Okay, so these aren't necessarily in order of importance or anything. They're just kind of as I went through the package. So the first is, can you clarify? I know it sounds obvious. What expired means? What does expired mean to us?
Okay, so for the variance, a variance expires after 2 years from the Board of Adjustment's decision. So that means that if they were to need a variance, the same variance, they'd have to go back and apply for a new one. With conditional use, they would have had to utilize that on Phase 2 within 1 year of approval. Otherwise, they would have to go back and start over and ask again.
Okay, so it means exactly what it means is it's in fact expired and all of that is gone and it's a do-over.
That's correct for Phase 2. It's obviously was implemented within the appropriate time frames for Phase 1. So Phase 1 uses both those, the variance and the conditional use for its approval.
Thank you. Again, these are not in order, okay? Under review criteria, number 4, adequacy of public facilities. And I'm just going to read the words that were typed, whoever wrote them. Levels of service are generally met with recreation being proposed at the clubhouse and the Duke Energy Easement. And then in a different place, you share some concern about maybe the lack of detail on the level of service for public facilities, specifically recreation. and I'm gonna hone in on this for a little bit. In previous applications, I know it doesn't apply, but there has been some concern from staff about the lack of recreation facilities within the city in some of these parks. So could you elaborate, generally meet recreation, and what would meet and exceed for recreation for this project?
I probably maybe danced around the item a little bit in the staff report, but actually the Board of Commissioners expressed concern a few developments back about the lack of tot lot mini park type facilities. Ever since then, we have been suggesting to plan development projects, subdivision, residential projects, that is a concern of the boards. The comprehensive plan shows a deficiency in that specific area. All our others, facilities, the athletic fields, the open space, nature park, all those standards have been met. There is no specific level of service for tot lot mini park in our code, the implementing code, but it is pointed out as a deficiency in the comprehensive plan. So we suggested to this applicant, as we have been doing for probably a couple of years now almost, you might want to address this. The applicant declined to create a tot lot out of one of the lots or anything like that. They labeled the easement as recreation open space. Beyond that, I have no details as to what that means, frankly. I believe the applicant will be maintaining that area, and they can speak to that as far as like mowing it.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt, forgive me. You helped
and
me
that's
with that, but I'm going to take this one just one step farther. And so there is a clear, in this application, there's a clear deficiency for Parks and Rec, we'll say, within the community. And you've brought it to their attention several times.
Yes, so they've done that easement, and yeah, the only other
Okay.
thing is they have a pool and community center.
Okay,
for
so
the
there's a pool in the community center in
Mhm.
phase one, but
Yeah.
not phase two, and phase two doesn't apply.
Well,
And-
phase two will have access to that community
To
center
that
and
pool. So,
Yes.
for example, and I'm going to elaborate on what you suggested, in another community I've seen that's a planned unit development, they would have set aside what they would call a common area that would be grassy, and there might be a swing set there in lieu of a house. Is that kind of the idea?
That's what some other applicants have done.
Okay, but that's not here. And then what is possibly being proposed is that underneath the Duke easement, is that where the power lines go?
Yes.
Okay, so that the kids go play under the power lines. I'm not even
like I
being
said-
funny. I think that's the idea, is that they go play in the deep grass that's really not part of the community. It's an easement for power lines.
And I'll let the applicant elaborate on, because I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, but that's been
They
what's
would.
been suggested in their application, is that somehow the power line zone is going to be a park.
Yes, by labeling the plans.
Okay.
Unless I missed it, I don't recall any narrative about what actually is happening there, but,
Okay.
yeah.
I've got a few more. Surprise. Okay.
ahead.
On sidewalks, been a lot of discussion lately in this area about sidewalks, is that it appears, and I tried to look real careful, is that the applicant has proposed a continuous sidewalk along Jasmine on the west side. Is that how I understood that?
Yes, down to their property line.
And then it goes up to the other side, so there'd be a sidewalk continuous. If you were able to walk out of the development, you could go right down the sidewalk and go left of the sidewalk. Now, the sidewalk ends, it doesn't really go anywhere, but more or less there's a sidewalk along there.
Yes.
I have a few more there, just, I gotta make sure that I get them right, okay?
That's fine.
Okay, and then I'm just gonna repeat, back to review criteria, environmental design, and I'm actually gonna read your concerns, because you're so polite and soft-spoken. Staff is concerned that new wetland impacts are primarily associated with the 7 new additional lots since the original proposed design in 2014. Rationale supporting those impacts has not been provided. So am I understanding that they had an original plan, they've jammed in 7 more lots, pushed it up against the wetland, and this has to do with that request for a waiver for 0, but yet you maybe have asked for a rationale of why and how you would do that, but they haven't answered those requests or offered support for that? Is that a fair analysis of kind of what's going on?
Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, they have provided a planning narrative with requests for waivers and rationales for those, but we don't see, we don't feel it's sufficient to support the request. I mean, they did, I would say, when you say have they addressed it, they did respond to our requests for more information, for information on these, but we don't feel that the basis supplied is sufficient.
Okay, thank you. On another page, this is staff recommendations, because you were polite enough to lay out a couple of options for thought process for us. And I'm just going to read this one. If we were to entertain approval, Phase 1 outstanding issues, clubhouse construction should be completed, CO. So I'm understanding that their first phase, they haven't even completed the work on the infrastructure for the first phase yet.
The site work and infrastructure are complete. They are building the townhomes now. The clubhouse has been built, and the pool has been installed. Applicant can correct me if that's wrong. The clubhouse cannot yet be occupied. It needs primarily sprinklers to be final.
Like a fire sprinkler
these
system.
items here, TRC really just wants to see these things addressed. This has been ongoing concern before we at least go to vertical construction on phase 2. So that's what we're looking for.
So it just struck me as odd, we haven't seen this before, that there's kind of a honey-do list of all the stuff that's not done on the first project.
It
if
is
I'm understanding
unusual.
this right.
Yeah.
And one sounded a little bit more serious, and I'm not seeing on this page that the lift station isn't complete, that there's a well that's got debris in it, and more or less the other site's got a bunch of garbage on it that needs to be just removed.
There were some issues, and I believe the applicant's engineer can address this, with the lift station not pumping, or maybe one pump wasn't working. That's been repaired, verified by our engineer. Our utility staff did a follow-up site visit and noted 3. The lift station is working. They verified it's working. And they noted these 3 items as outstanding items for the next site visit. They would like to see that logbook, and they want to see these 2 other items addressed.
Pardon me? Is there enough capacity at the lift station? I think that would be part of the design. So does that mean that there's one lift station for both phases?
Yes.
Do I understand that?
As far as I know, yeah. And it's adequate for both phases.
Has the city of Tarpon Springs ever granted no buffer whatsoever against a wetland? 0?
Well, the city has granted wetland impacts, as you're aware. And yeah, I think we probably granted little or no buffer. You're going to ask me which project?
No, I'm not. I'm not going to
okay.
put you on the spot.
I mean, we do get requests for waivers, to that 50-foot requirement on RPD. If you're going to ask me if we granted a 0, I'm not sure.
Okay, and so of course, we also know that that wetland is covered by SwiftMud, and there's a notation that there has to be a SwiftMud permit,
Yes,
but that hasn't been applied for and hasn't been provided, so.
it's been applied for.
It's been
and
applied for,
it's
and this is maybe not a question you can answer, but is SwiftMud gonna buy off on everything being butted up right against this wetland?
I believe the applicant is working with them on, that's why the buffer compensation. That is, I believe, in response mostly to SwiftMud. So you've got impacts to wetlands, and you have to compensate for that somehow. I think with SwiftMud, if you have impacts to a buffer, you also have to compensate for that somehow, and the applicant can probably confirm whether my statement there is accurate. So that's what they're trying to do. And I know they're working with SwiftMud on trying to come to a resolution for both of those types of impacts and the mitigation for those.
I have just a couple more.
Take your time.
Thank you for your patience, everyone. Under page 3 of 15 of a detailed list of notations from the planning and zoning staff, there was a comment that a whole bunch of things have to be done for the final plan development submittal. When is that? Is that, if they made it past us, they do all the things that you asked, and then that's the first reading at the Board of Commissioners?
Once you look at this and give a recommendation, assuming that's what happens tonight, this preliminary plan development will go to the Board of Commissioners for 2 readings. It's an ordinance, so it'll have the 2 readings. Once they adopt that ordinance, the applicant can come back to the Board of Commissioners for the final plan development. That's what this list of items applies to.
Okay. A lot of things to get off that checklist. Okay. This one's going to be a little bit tougher, Pat. Page 6 of 15, under staff analysis, wetlands impacts. And this is part of staff's concern about this lack of, I want to use the right word, the waiver request for the wetlands that does not comply. Objective 1.1 of the coastal planning element, I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's a paragraph.
Where are you reading it from?
Oh, it's page 6 of 15 at the back portion of the application.
Okay.
And then halfway down, it's just, the staff is providing an analysis of the comprehensive plan of what meets and what doesn't, and then bringing out the comprehensive plan as to why. So objective 1.1 of our comprehensive plan is in reference to the coastal planning element. It's the intent to protect that. And I want to read one sentence so I've got this right.
And
Okay, well, I'm gonna, because I know what it says, and because on another page.
That's in the staff report, and I have attached that objective at the end of the staff report.
And that's about what I was,
Yeah.
oh, here it is. This is
So
the
you have all
objective.
the language.
See, we got it in 2 spots here.
Right.
Policy 1.1, evaluate all wetlands for future preservation designation with a goal of, in quotations, no net loss of wetlands. Okay, so here's the tough question. As proposed, is there a net loss of wetlands?
The net loss is determined by the Southwest Florida Water Management's approved mitigation. So their resulting water management permit will include mitigation that results in the state's determination, which is what we must fall under, of no net loss of wetlands.
Okay, so we don't know that yet.
We don't know that yet,
So, I'm
But-
sorry to interrupt you.
you know, they
Go
can't.
ahead.
So why is the application here?
Well, we usually don't require, and really, the city cannot require an applicant to get state and federal permits to appear before the city boards.
Okay, so.
But we can require that those standards be met before the site work is done.
Before the end is, so, because have been too polite to weigh in as a staff recommendation, and I want you to know I really appreciate that. It appears to me, and it appears that that it clearly does not meet the comprehensive plan objective 1.1 of no wetland impact. Can I put that on you? Is that a fair analysis that
Yeah,
as submitted, it doesn't meet that
So
objective?
here's why we couldn't get there. We've seen applications where we have wetland impacts, right? We've seen applications where there might be a small isolated wetland in the middle of a property. And I don't know, I've seen them several times over the years. That is something that may be unavoidable to build around and may not even make sense. You might be a disturbed wetland loaded with melaleuca or Brazilian pepper tree, right? And then it makes more sense, and with a development layout, it may be very difficult to build a development in the land, on the land that's there, without impacting that wetland. It may make no sense for some small isolated piece to be, to try to leave it. In this case, we have a large cypress wetland where we have additional impacts really by adding to the periphery of the development. We're pushing into those. We're pushing the road into it, the roadway, and the lots. So it's harder to say I can't avoid this wetland, or it would be very difficult to avoid this wetland. It was harder for us to say that and come up with a staff, like I say, straight-faced kind of rationale of, oh yeah, we've got to have these 7 additional lots, so that's why the impacts, and we just could not get there. So each situation is unique, and again, this is a native cypress wetland. It's not a highly disturbed, although it's going to be, it's pretty much encircled by disturbed uplands. It is not a badly degraded wetland or anything of that sort my understanding is. The mitigation is going to be to scrape down and plant more cypress wetlands adjacent to the cypress that's there. I don't know if that helps.
It does. Okay. It did help.
And it's a judgment call. That's the comprehensive plan, right? We have the implementing regulations that talk about mitigation, but just that, this is one of those judgment calls that you look at the comprehensive plan and say, where is this on that scale of, yeah, the city does allow wetland impacts. That's not the waiver request. The waiver request is to the buffer. They don't have to have a waiver request to impact wetlands. We do allow that. It's just that, where on that scale is it? Where on that reasonable use of the property is it? Those are the questions, and we, again, couldn't get to that point.
Okay. And then I'm just going to read what's obvious, and we're all here there, is that the critical elements is that the project does not comply with the side yard setback, the corner lot setback, the rear yard setback, or the wetland buffers, or the staggered effect. So out of 11 items, it fails 5. I'm just repeating that for emphasis. And those are what the waiver requests are for, and you were willing to give away a couple of those, but not one of those.
Not the wetland setback. Again, the rest
but technically, you don't have to give away any of them.
No.
Wouldn't it be nice if all the boxes were checked?
Yeah, but you got to look at, so we looked at the development. I mean, this, again, staff encouraged the applicant to go with the RPD standard. If this were a brand new blank piece of land, and you're asking for, we have had requests for waivers to that 50-foot setback before. that is something that the RPD assumes that we are a brand-new development on a completely vacant piece of land. So now I can apply that newer standard, that 50 feet. We've had a couple, you guys might remember, where we didn't recommend we recommended denial of those waivers. In this case, it's not a completely new development, and
why
we've
isn't
kind of introduced these standards. The yard setbacks, obviously, to be consistent with the first phase, you want the development to look consistent. They want to build the same look of product, so.
So this circles us
that
all
makes
the way
sense.
back around, forgive me for interrupting, to the fact that this is a brand-new development because those other waivers are expired.
Phase 2 is a new development, yeah.
So in the strict interpretation, it should comply with all of the requirements of an RPD.
If you apply a strict
It's a-
interpretation, that's
It's
correct.
unfortunate the clock runs out. It happens to all of us at some point on some things. Okay.
That's true.
I asked an awful lot of questions. Thank you so much for
Well,
your
thank you.
patience.
Well, thank you for your question.
That's fine.
Any other board members have any questions?
I have a quick question. The staff does actually sit there and say that, for like the give and take of it, that the 15-foot for the wetland buffer is acceptable as long as they keep it down to 59 lots instead of 66, correct?
Yeah, staff would be willing to support, I think, the waiver
15 feet?
consistent with the previous proposal. You're probably going to have some adjustment of that buffer to accommodate the 59 lots that were originally proposed for phase 2. And we're certainly amenable to looking at that. I think we would probably support that.
And is that because of the fact that those 7 additional houses that they're asking to be built, that's what's actually taking the impact of the wetlands?
That,
That's making that impact of the wetlands?
Yes.
So that's the, okay, so they're thinking that 7 additional lots that they're trying to build is the factor that's actually making the impact that's going on there?
that's our contention, is that the 7 additional lots are causing the wetland impacts to build those 7 lots.
Mr. Stavropoulos, do you have any questions?
No, I'm just listening to the conversation here.
I have a few questions. So they're looking at consistency between phase 1 and phase 2 with design and all other elements. That'd probably be a fair statement.
Yes,
Okay. Phase 1, the city had required them to do a 15-foot wetlands buffer.
correct.
Okay. And on this particular application, they want a 0 buffer.
So on phase 1, 15 feet was required, and they got a waiver to portions of that. So it
They got a
var-
waiver for 15, to go to 15 feet.
No.
It was 15
In
feet?
phase 1, they processed the entire thing under residential multifamily. In that case, you just go to our Article 4 section of the code, standard wetland buffer,
And that
which
was
is
15 foot.
15.
Okay.
That's what applied to the project.
But
They
this
got a
but
variance.
this particular development, because they're coming under something different, it's a 50-foot, and they're asking for a 0.
Yes, they're asking for 0 to 15 feet.
Okay, and then the applicant went in front of the Technical Review Committee several times, who noted the deficiencies in the application. And just reading from your report, and the staff noted the deficiencies and concerns outlined in this report and expressed the same to the applicant.
Yes.
The applicant is elected to go to public hearing with no changes to the proposed project. Just throwing that out there. I know one of the discussions we had several weeks ago was about affordable housing. Does this fall on that criteria? Or-
This project, no,
Yeah.
it has been proposed, to my knowledge, as market rate.
Okay. one other question that I had. I write notes on all these different pages, and then I can't find the pages. You know, maybe it's best to get to the applicant. I have no other questions for you.
Okay.
At this point, would the applicant like to make a presentation?
There we go. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
There we go, good, okay, thank you. My name is Dr. William S. Conrad. I am a land use planner. I am the planner, I'm the guy who was here at the beginning of this entire exercise, this entire project. So, you know, I'd like to answer your questions, and I think once you hear the answers and you understand the historical context and the planning and approval process and the underlying rationale that preceded all of this and was part of the original development, I think that'll help to clarify a lot of this, and it'll all fall into place. And of course, we're here to answer any questions. I have our engineer, Rich, here, and also the applicant, so we're all pleased to have the opportunity. And obviously, based upon the discussion that's taken place, clearly there has to be questions answered, but I'm confident that once you understand the history, the precedent, and all the things that preceded, and all the things that are part of this project, that it'll all fit in and make sense. First of all, the project from the very beginning, 2014, was initially envisioned as one single project. So when the entire project was designed, it was designed as a single unit. It's like Solomon, you know, splitting the baby here. You know, the whole project is consistent. It was designed as a single project, and one depends upon the other. For instance, everyone who is now in phase one, I mean, it's a disservice not to allow the project to go forward, because it would create a certain hardship not only on the applicant but also on the people who are now in phase one. The other thing is that when we initially began, we went through a very, very detailed process. And we went through a lot of planning, and we went through a technical review committee, and we went through all of these things. And the project was approved as proposed. And so, you know, what I think creates a lot of confusion right now is the fact that we started with one process, and now we've shifted to another process, and that was mutually agreed to by staff and by the developer, because we both agreed, and I think Pat will confirm this, that we felt that this would expedite the process and would be the best way to go. So that was the underlying rationale. From my, and I think what happens is your eyes tend to glaze over when you start comparing the one process with another process, the requirements of this process, the requirements of that process, what is the standard here, what is the standard there. I think, look, we have to kind of cut through all of that, and yes, we have to comply, but from the very beginning, when we initiated this process, all of these requested variances at that time were provided because of the fact that this is a very, very difficult site. Half the site is open space, okay? First of all, you've got that huge wetland area to comply with, and then in addition to that, you've got the easement that we have to deal with. So consequently, there are, as staff recognized, and as previous staff recognized, and as previous planning and zoning boards, and as previous boards of adjustment have recognized, we're dealing with a constrained site, but however, a viable site that adds a great deal to the community. So, you know, that's kind of bit of the filter that you have to use when looking at this. Now, by the way, obviously I have to thank staff, and staff has worked hard and they've done a great job. And we've all been working towards one thing, producing a development project that is going to be a success, that is going to be an addition to the community. And based upon my understanding, and Pat, you can correct me, I think that staff is in support of the development project as it was submitted in 2014. I mean, I think that's, if we were just to take the project, the second phase of the 2014 plan, we went forward with phase 1, we didn't go forward with phase 2, I think staff would basically give it its blessing and say, okay, this is what we mean. This is what we're happy with. I think staff also supports the current application. Clearly, we meet all of these criteria. Obviously, we need all of these variances that we had previously to complete the project. So I think the real issue with staff is these additional units. And staff is absolutely right. We didn't do a very good job in explaining, and I'll take responsibility for that, explaining what the underlying rationale is. We assume that, okay, we're going ahead, and the engineer will talk in detail that we're going ahead, we're providing mitigation that exceeds the level of impact. The impacts are very, very small. You're dealing with a very kind of disturbed wetland area. And so from a SwiftMud point of view also, and the engineer will give us an update, that if SwiftMud is satisfied with it and gives us his blessing, why should this not be acceptable to the city? And because they will have the last say. The outstanding items, the checklist that is there, that's normal. This is a project that is ongoing. This is not a project that's finished. This is not phase 1. You cross all the I's, dot the T's, and it's done. This project is in process. In all the meetings we've had with TRC, everyone has recognized, okay, these things have to be done. For instance, the clubhouse is a big one. Why is the clubhouse not completed? Because we needed electrical work done. That electrical work, as you could hear from the applicant, is going to be done here shortly. All right. We still have roughly a couple of units to complete and CO, and that will probably be done in, I don't know, 2-3 months? 2 months. So you have to realize that this project is in process, that these items such as lampposts, lights are going to be addressed. You can't separate the two because the very emergency access that's going to be provided comes in phase 2. There are people, just recently I was talking to one gentleman here outside who is concerned about the emergency medical access because there are potential issues. He needs to know that an emergency vehicle can get in. That doesn't happen unless phase 2 is approved. From the very beginning, phase 1 and phase 2 are one project. Pardon?
No, I'm sorry, that's for public comment.
And I'll need clarity on that question. I'll be happy to answer it, though, in time, because, I believe that your question should always be treated with respect and valid, so, but I'll just continue. Right now, I'll stick with the planning stuff. How's that? Okay. So, so basically, I think the key issue here, I think that has to be addressed is the 7 lots. All right. Could the developer adjust the plan to address those if required, basically take it back to the original 2004, yes, but I think he's justified in seeking the highest and best use for his property. He's probably, I just estimated, he's probably paid just shy of $1 million in taxes on that property from the beginning of the period where he started this. The applicant also has rights. When we went through this process, the applicant went on good faith. We had, earlier on, no one was involved with these discussions, but the decision to go ahead with phase 1 and hold on phase 2, you know, there was a good faith understanding by the applicant that he would be treated fairly and that the types of considerations and the approvals that were granted him based upon the physical aspects and the planning rationale at that time would hold. So those are some things to consider. So regarding the planned development, staff agrees that a reduction, and I'm reading from the report, Pat. Staff agrees that a reduction of the 50-foot requirement is reasonable in this case due to the site configuration and the desire to be consistent with a Phase 1 and original development layout as much as possible. So that the design was predicated on these assumptions and is there, okay? Okay. Regarding the rationale, so basically the plan as proposed without the lots would probably be in full compliance with everything that staff wants. But the rationale now, though, for why the additional 7 lots, so I'll address that. And Pat, I'll provide that to you as a document, okay, that you can include to the report, okay, for subsequent hearing. First of all, regarding the issue of the number of units, okay, the permitted units based upon the 16.52 acres is 122 units. The 2014 plan had 95 units. The 2022 plan proposes 102 units. That's 20 units below what, okay, hypothetically, what would be legal and permissible, subject, of course, to site conditions. There's an increase of 7 units, and we're still 13 units below what would be the maximum under the existing zoning, the land use and zoning. And the request is compatible with land use and zoning. So that, I want to establish that first, that this is not just wild request. Regarding the wetlands and the wetland buffer, the total site is 16.52 acres. The wetland and the submerged lands are 4.78 acres. The Duke easement is 3.55. The total wetlands open space is 8.3 acres, which is 50% of the site. 50% of the site is open space. So there's a lot of land given to open space and to wetlands. The rationale for justification for the request, there are a number of them. First of all, the 7, what we're basically looking at, what we're basically weighing here in the balance is the fact that there's 5,847 square foot of wetlands that are the issue and the impact versus the mitigation of 8,596. So we're mitigating more than required. And mitigation, by the way, is a standard tool for dealing with sites that are difficult to deal with, as in this case, and which makes perfect sense. The question is, this is what the impact is and what the supposed loss is of wetlands. The other side of the question or the equation has to be also looked at. What is lost if we don't grant those additional 7 lots? What do those 7 lots mean? Those 7 lots mean 7 families looking for housing. Housing is, by definition, a public interest. It's a responsibility of government to provide housing, to meet the housing needs of its people, all right? So consequently, this, when you also weigh and compare the loss of 7 homes, in essence, you're looking at a loss to the community and a loss of opportunity to the community. This decision is going to affect the next 50, 75, 100 years. So you are looking at a fraction of an acre versus 7 lots, 7 homes, 7 families. So you have to balance that, and that's part of our rationale, Pat, that we like to present. The other thing is, of course, whenever you talk about housing, what else do you talk about? You talk about ad valorem taxes. You talk about impact fees. You talk about application fees. You talk about water and sewer fees to the city. These are all the things that the city needs to operate and to run. Okay? So that's from a community and from a planning perspective and from the point of meeting the needs and the requirements and caring for the community. The purpose of planning is to provide for the public health, safety, and welfare of the community. These additional 7 homes promote all of those. The other issue, of course, is the applicant. An applicant does have rights, and as long as you comply and as long as you're reasonable, and of course sometimes decisions have to be made weighing the environment against other benefits, social benefits, economic benefits, that all comes into it. And that's kind of where I think you are. You're in the position here where you have to, I think as far as the plan itself, you know, has been gone through long ago, approved, and I think staff's issue right now is the wetlands. They want a narrative, they want support, and this is what I'm giving you right now. I guess you have to make that decision as to which weighs more heavily, whether you can see whether you see the 7 units being more important or the small fraction of an acre of wetlands that are going to be mitigated anyways. So I hope that helps. Now I know you have a lot of questions and we want to get to them, but I just wanted to give you a quick overview. Yes, sir.
Okay, first of all, I appreciate the applicant's noble cause by adding 7 more units. But let's be honest, 7 more units means more income and more profitability. I've never known a developer to develop more density because it was a noble cause. So, you know, okay. So I guess my question is, I'm sorry, I didn't know if you were finished or not, because I do have some comments when you're done.
No, I mean, the engineer is up and can answer some questions, but certainly, we're both here. So.
Okay, all right. The thing is, you said earlier that had this thing been approved years ago, obviously we wouldn't be here, but you're asking for consistency from phase 1 to phase 2, and that's what I think I heard you say. I don't disagree with that, okay? But to be consistent, phase 1 had a 15-foot wetland setback, and that's not being consistent.
Can I clear a couple of things up?
Okay.
Rich Kelly, I'm the civil engineer of project. The original project, the requirement was a 15-foot setback that was reduced by variance to 0. Under the new process, it's a 50-foot setback that we're now reducing to 0. So it was 0 either way. And the 7 lots, adding 7 lots is the wetland impact, I think is a little bit misleading. We're adding 7 lots, yes. One of the lots is, I think, 90 square feet on a tip of a wetland that Swift Mode wouldn't even look at because it's just 90 square feet. The rest of the impact is for 2 of the other units that are going to the north. So it's 90 there, it's about 2,000 there, another 2,000 along the southern lobe of the wetland, the regular shape portion. We're straightening it out. Could we reduce that? Yes. But to reduce that means further reducing the yards. We could shrink the yards by 10 feet on either side and have 20 foot less of a wetland impact, but they would have no yards. Some of phase 1 has no yards, but we chose to continue the yards and give everybody a 10-foot backyard. And as far as the mitigation for the compensation for the wetland impacts, that's the Swift Mud's call. Swift Mud rates the wetland and then there's a big, long math equation that goes along with it. And what it boils down to in this case is we're providing an additional 50 to 60% compensation for what we're removing. In other words, we're filling about 5,200 square feet of wetland. We're giving you back almost 9,000 square feet. And that same holds true with the buffer. The buffer, we're eliminating some buffer. We're providing 50 to 60% more buffer. So there's no loss in anything in a wetland that's surrounded by development, that has limited functionality, and there's a environmental report in there that discusses what's in the wetland and what's not. So the trade-off is you're getting 50 to 60% more wetland than you have now, and it'll be in better condition.
When the applicant bought the property, okay, because one of the concerns or one of the things that y'all addressed is the difficulties with that type of, with the property that you have. You have the large utility easement, you've got the wetlands, et cetera. Isn't that part of, would you do your due diligence to purchase the property, to recognize and understand some of the difficulties that that site might bring?
Yeah, we knew that going in, but that was, again, that was a long time ago. SWIFMA's rules have changed and made it much more difficult. We wouldn't have had to provide the additional probably 50 or 60% back in those days. It would have been maybe a 1-for-1 or even less than 1-to-1 because the wetland isn't superior quality.
Rich, there's also going back, this is one advantage of being older, going back to the historic perspective, this property was not zoned initially for residential. We rezoned it. So we were dealing with industrial. So you have to, again, see, so at that, based upon the original intent and understanding of the applicant, of course, that wasn't even in the thinking process, but you're absolutely right.
So when y'all went in front of the TRC, and the TRC expressed its concerns to the applicant, and this kind of bothers me that the applicant elected to go public hearing with no changes to the proposed project, instead of maybe addressing or trying to address the concerns of TRC.
I'm not sure it was ever a concern of TRC that we were involved in the wetland. That was something that shows up from SWIFMA. If SWIFMA's okay with it.
What's this? Staff has noted the deficiencies of concern outlined in the report that they had prepared and expressed them to the applicant. The applicant has elected to go forward or go to public hearing with no changes to the proposed project. So, I mean, that's my concern. Instead of saying, okay, what can we do to address some of the concerns this staff has, and whether you could address them and say, wait a minute, staff, we don't think your concerns are valid, or we have, or attempt to try to resolve.
Well, the attempt to try to resolve would be bring them a SWIFMA permit.
If I may, I think there's just a gap in communication. He's referring to all the other additional deficiencies that staff noted, of which I'm going to segue right to.
Okay.
What's the plan for turning the power utility easement into a playground?
The way I understand it is the city is deficient in parkland, not the site itself. Phase 1 and Phase 2 has the clubhouse and the pool. The city's deficient, so we're given the opportunity for an open space in the Duke Energy easement that will be maintained, and we didn't want to get specific because, like I said, the site wasn't deficient, so it wasn't something the site had to create to get site approval. It was just something to apply to the city if the city indeed wanted something on the site.
And I'm interested in hearing everyone. I think you're the owner.
Yes, my name's Manuel Indiakis.
Hi, Manuel. Thanks for coming. And forgive me, I tried to see all your names on that sheet of paper, but I lost it in the shuffle, so forgive me for not.
Let's go to the comment where we didn't address any of those issues at the TRC. We addressed most of them. I'll tell you which ones are still outstanding. They wanted us to put in the deed restrictions, the no parking signs, and a couple other little things. The lawyer did that, okay? We got the lift station fixed, okay? They want me to put some street signs and a no parking on the street sign. I ordered them, so that it's not like, it sounds like we're sitting here doing nothing, coming to you guys with, nothing being done. That's not the case, okay? What was the other thing? The clubhouse, there's one little thing with the electric, pool, the electric permit has to get inspected, and that's the last thing with that, okay? So, and the big thing with the TRC was they wanted to make sure the lift station worked. So we got the lift station looked at, then they wanted us to get it certified by an engineer. He got the engineer to sign off on it, so that's 100% working. The little bit of trash or something that they're talking about in there, that doesn't prevent the lift station from working, and we can clean that if we want. The lift station people that we hired, they're gonna start putting this little thing where they come and inspect it, because there's not that many people living there now. Right now there's, phase 1's 36. It was only 18 living there just recently. Now we just got 6 more moved in, and the plan is the last 2 buildings are gonna be finished in the next probably 60 days. Unfortunately, with COVID and the shortage of workers, you can't get people to show up, and a building went from 8 months to build to now 11, 12 months to finish by the time these people show up. Okay, so.
I'm so sorry, I'm gonna interrupt, and that's not very polite of me,
Okay.
but I was asking a question specifically, and if I may be so bold as to correct the engineer, I don't think I heard staff incorrectly in, yes, the city does have a deficiency in regards to parks, but I believe that specifically staff said your project has a deficiency in that category.
No.
Anyone can share with me.
Pat would have to clear that up.
Gentlemen,
but
let's-
I don't think
one
that's what I heard.
second. As we keep, since all 3 of you are there, and you keep going back and forth, whenever you start speaking, please state your name, so the
Okay.
record, we know who's speaking and
Okay.
responding to questions. I know that's gonna be awkward, but I think it'll be easier for everybody.
This
Thank
is
you.
Manuel speaking. I don't think she said our project has a deficiency, but she had suggested that based on these last hearings you had with the apartment complex and a couple of all these other things, be a good idea if we dedicate an open space. So we said, hey, that was my plan anyways. I plan on putting a dog park there. I plan on putting additional parking for people over there that live there. And I was planning on putting like a little nature trail where you walk, because what we have there is an easement that's 160 feet by almost 800 feet long, okay? So that's gonna be a big park area for the community. You see what I'm saying? And I could put that on the plan if you want me to.
Is Duke cool with that?
Duke doesn't have a problem with that, as long as we don't, if we put fences up, if they have to go work on there, they have to take them down.
So, well, I'm so sorry, because this is important. Forgive me for interrupting again. What if they change their mind? Is this going to be written into their easement, that it now becomes a recreation area for the development?
Duke Energy has an easement only. They don't have a right-of-way there, so they can't tell us what we can and can't do. The big thing they didn't want there was additional drainage. Originally, I was gonna put a lake there to cover the fill that I need, okay? They didn't want us to do that. I was back and forth with the lawyer. So I said, Rich, can we fit the drainage in the existing pond? So it all fits over there. We had to connect it. And, as long as we give them access to their lines, they can't pretty much tell us out. We can't put a tennis court there because of the fence. But we can put a dog park, a little 4-foot fence. We can put trails in there if we want. We can put parking spaces. And they're in there doing their thing now. I don't know if you noticed, they're changing a couple poles, and they're doing that. But the plan is to make that part of the community and make it a beautiful space because we're very dog friendly here. I'm gonna put a dog park. I wanna put a little nature park where you can walk around, and then I'm gonna have an area where the retention pond is, where the community can go back there and have a little picnic over there. So, we're gonna make that a recreation area.
Mr. Lindiak, is that on your site plan?
It says recreation area, but I haven't scribbled down where the dog park's gonna go and all that stuff yet, which I can. And one of the reasons we didn't do it already is that shouldn't stop us from moving ahead. I mean, we still got 2 more meetings with the commissioners. You follow me?
I do. I have two more questions, but I don't want to.
But, you know, well, I think some of the times what the issues, which is not your problem, the issues that we have is we want to make sure what we recommend or some of the discussions that we have actually make it to the commission, and that the commission has the opportunity to listen to what our recommendations are. And that's not your problem,
Right.
so. I'm sorry.
I didn't want to ask any more. I wanted to give Jim and Melissa a chance to.
So does anybody have any questions of the applicant?
So I don't have a problem showing, you know, we listed that whole area, it's almost 3 acres for a recreation area, you know? And the people that live there, these people all are living here now. You know, I was gonna ask them what they might want me to put in there. For sure, I'm putting a dog park. I was gonna put a little a nice little park where you could walk around the community, you know, you wanna exercise, you know, and it's gonna be maintained by the community as well, as far as that goes. Now, as far as the wetland encroachment, it is deceiving because, you know, it sounds like we're really need that area to get 7 lots. It's only a couple, 2 or 3 lots that are actually encroaching in the wetland. And if you go look at it, you know, we're giving them back. We're giving you twice as much as we need. It's 5,000 square feet out of 5 acres of wetland is all we're encroaching, you know? That's all we're asking for.
2 questions still.
Okay.
Why did the original variance and permits or agreements expire?
Okay, let me tell you how that happened, okay?
Do.
I bought this property 2006, was ready to go 2008, the economy fell on its butt, okay? And that's my problem, I got stuck with it. Luckily, I didn't lose it. Thank God, it turned around, I was able to get it back, get it going again. 2014, we finally decided we got a chance to get this going and make something out of it. And then, nobody told us those variances, which is a 7.5-foot setback, and they've already given us for 24 lots, the rear yard setback. They gave that to us in phase 1. And then on phase 2, we need it for 5, we need it for maybe 15 lots out of the 66. It's not all 66 lots get a setback variance. It's just it's the 5 that are on Jasmine, and then there's 2 buildings that are back by the renal, the kidney place. Okay, and the reason we needed to go from 15 to 7.5 is if you look at the property, I got that wetland in the middle of it, okay, and then I know I should have did my due diligence, but you know, it was a tough property. Plus, we had to design it for a 100-year storm event, okay? And anybody else, they could have went and bought wetlands at a wetland bank and tried to take out the whole wetland. I didn't do that. You know, I like the wetland, you know? Just now, I'm asking for 7 more lots to help. You know, I've been carrying this thing for almost 16 years, and it doesn't mean nothing to anybody else, but I got $1 million in freaking taxes I paid, okay? And yeah, the 7 lots are gonna help me get a little bit of it back, but all my costs went up. My development costs went from $900,000, it's gonna be over $1.5 million just to develop the stupid property, the phase 2, okay? So, if you looked at the zoning, I could put, he said 120, it's 127 lots, because you get I got 12 acres of upland, at 10 is 122 lots, plus 1 lot per wetland. So it's 127 lots if I really wanted to try to jam it all in there. I'm only asking 102 versus 127. That's 20% less that I could put in there if we wanted to go in there and stuff them in there.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because we hear that again and again, and I'm hearing it right now, is we could do that, but right now, you can't make these extra 7 fit.
Well, the 7
How
fit.
how would you get 122?
If somebody wanted to put 3-story condos, you know, people do it all around here. They put 4-story apartment complexes. They got them all over the place. I don't want to do that. I'm just asking for 7 more lots. And actually, if we didn't encroach in the wetlands, it would be about, I'd probably lose 2 or 3 out of the 7 because I wouldn't have to encroach. So it's not, I'm not encroaching to get 7. I'm encroaching more or less to get 3 more if you look at the plan. You follow me?
I do.
I mean,
I looked at the plan.
you know, we're ready to finish. The good news is, people are signed up for the units. I got my finances in order. As soon as you give us the gung-ho, we're gonna be tearing, I just submitted to tear down the buildings, so I'm ready to tear down that crap that's out there now, okay? And if you give us permission to go forward, you know, we'll have this thing done in 2 years. It'll be finished. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to ask them.
You've been colorful all your life, and I appreciate how colorful you are in your presentation. So, any staff, any questions of the applicant? There being none, any public comment?
Thank you.
My name is Joel Bouchard, and I'm a resident, 769 Grand Cypress Lane.
Oh, I'm sorry, 1 second. To the board, you can set time limits for public hearing, 4 minutes per speaker if you would like to. That's what your rules allow.
If everybody's going to speak, thank you for
Yes.
flagging that. I will go ahead and.
I was asked to speak on behalf of our current community.
All right, so then I give you more than 4 minutes.
Yeah,
then.
I was gonna say, he can go up to 10 minutes if he's the only speaker.
Well, I may not be the only speaker, but I will limit it as closely as I can. But I've been asked to speak on behalf of the community.
I'm sorry, I want to interrupt. Either we're in or we're out. So it's either 4 per, or he speaks for
Well, it's-
everybody.
Let me get to the actual rule. It's not the only, if he's the only speaker, it's a limit to the individuals that are present. So let me just read it and make sure we get it correct. It's 4 minutes per person. I just had it, hold on, where did you go? Yeah, all right, it says, members of the public present at the hearing may donate their time to a speaker to extend the speaker's time, but said donation shall forfeit the donator's right to speak. Each donation shall extend the speaker's time an additional 2 minutes. In no event shall the speaker's time be extended beyond 10 minutes of total speaking time. So if this gentleman's speaking on behalf of others, we need to know who they are and how many there are to get the timing correct.
So why don't we do that? Why don't we limit it to 4 minutes? Let whoever's going to donate their time, and the max you could speak is 10 minutes.
That's fine. I appreciate that.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. Again, my name's Joel Bouchard, 769 Grand Cypress Lane, and I'm speaking on behalf of our Resident Owners Association, who the majority of Phase 1 is here. I want to thank you for your time and your diligence in this project. It is a nice project. There's a reason why we chose to live there, but there are a whole host of issues that you've all touched on this evening that we feel is very important to all of us. And I'm going to try and make this as small as possible. You've already hashed a good portion of our concerns in regards to the wetlands, the setbacks, and the changing of the community as it was originally laid out. When we bought into this complex, it was 95 units. We were promised things, we were shown things, and we were told certain things were going to happen. Again, comments I make to that is, let's see it in writing, and who's going to follow up on it. We have already discovered a whole host of issues as residents and taxpayers in the town of Tarpon, that living here, we are limited. You talk about resources, open spaces, parking is already a critical problem. We have a clubhouse that we, haven't had a CO on in 2 years with residents living there. We have a pool and a hot tub. Again, all other issues we could discuss at another point in time. But parking, key. 4 spots at the pool outside of the 2 handicaps. Okay? Currently, given the state of the widths of the driveways in Phase 1, certain residents can't even park their cars side by side in their driveways. 2 parking spaces. Can't do that. Parking at the pool, in the clubhouse. Okay? We have lampposts that everybody keeps touching base on. Mine was in the middle of my garage. We had to have that moved before we could start the driveway. We currently have a resident that has been living there for over a year that has a lamppost that does not grant access to their driveway. They have to drive around it to get into their garage. not being moved, been sitting there. Now it's a legal battle. We have had power issues that were approved in this community to where the power is run. We've had multiple units with no power or inadequate power to sustain the unit's operations or the home's operation. Duke Energy has been telling residents here, hey, it's a design flaw. This was approved by the town or zoning or whoever, and we don't know why they ever approved this. This is constantly going to be a headache. Please, I implore you, come take a look. Come talk to the residents. Has anybody here set foot in Grand Cypress Lane? The Grand Cypress project? Anybody?
I remind the board you don't have to answer questions during public comment.
Okay, I'm sorry. All right. Great building. We love where we live. There is a lot of opportunity there. Tarpon is a great place. We just don't want to be narrowed into a tight box where phase one already is. We're going to add another 7 units on top of what was originally proposed. There is nothing anywhere in here that shows the open space, additional parking. Right now, when everybody moves in and people are moving in, there's no place to park. 2 cars in the driveway, where's the moving truck going to be? Where's the construction equipment going to be? Everything is in the roadway. There's a proposed in here in the drawing that we see for the second access, and everything here, everybody's statements is that it's for emergency use only. We were promised that was a second entrance, so the whole second phase doesn't have to come through the first phase and out one single gate to get out of the community. Again, not a lot of foresight here, and
Is that the 4-minute?
That was the 4-minute mark.
Okay,
so
I
Okay.
guess somebody wants to go ahead and give your time? Okay, go ahead, I'm sorry.
State your name, please. Can you hear him?
Walter Burns?
Name and address, if you, real loud for. Thank you, sir.
So real quickly, we want to see our community completed. We all bought into the way it was originally proposed, the time lapsed on. We just feel that at this point in time, our well-being and the future of the community is going to be in great jeopardy. I can go through a list of things that are not your concerns about what's been going on, but you definitely need to look at this proposal with an open mind going forward, how it's going to impact the residents that are going to live there, where they're going to park their cars, where guests are going to come to visit them. Are they going to park in the pond? Where are they going to park? I mean, open dog parks, stuff like that. That's great conversation, but I don't see it. That's really all I have for you. And anybody that ever wants to call me and discuss about the whole project, I'm well open to talk to anybody that wants to hear it, so.
Thank you.
Len Branswitz, I'm at 753 Grand Cypress. I moved in August of 20. I'm a physician and a pharmacist and a researcher. And one of the first things I researched moving into that property were those power lines. Because part of the research I did, going back when I lived in the city of Pittsburgh, was the risk factors of leukemia being anywhere near those lines. You can look it up in the British Medical Journal, was just published recently. 28% increased risk of childhood leukemia being anywhere underneath those lines. That's a problem for me. Problem number 2, when I moved in, I wanted to check on HOA structure, and I know that has nothing to do with this board here. But I started to look at how this corporation that started in 2014 had everything laid out, and how many things in the whole structure of Manuel's properties are listed under the ownership of the HOA, which was fine. I didn't have a problem with that, but being semi-retired now, I planned on moving into this place as my last home. I was going to stay here. My concern is with the infrastructure of this project, with the pumps that have already gone bad once. And when I looked and saw how everything is filed, and everything is under the name of the HOA, which is a real big problem, because if something does happen when he finally turns this over to the HOA, it's going to be split among the owners. Right now, there are 17 active owners. 90% of them are here today. There's a major concern of what's going on in this property. Major concerns. When I looked at the finances that were just published at the end of 2021, and the HOA had a $63,000 loss. That's a problem, because if that gets turned over with only 17 units, a $63,000 loss, what's going to happen when we're up to 92? That's a concern for me as a resident. I don't need those expenses passed on. I'm on a fixed income right now. You don't have to feel sorry for me, but I don't want those kind of expenses passed on to me at any point. That property with those easements cannot be used. You can check with Duke Energy. You cannot put property under there. You can't have children under there. You can't have pets under there. That's a real big problem. I know, and on the surface it sounds really good. Just look it up. In all the medical journals, it's everywhere. 28 to 38% increased risk of leukemia in children and in pets. Thank you.
Hi, Dawn Bouchard, 769 Grand Cypress Lane. Thank you for your time and listening to us. One of the real concerns I have is when this community is turned over to the HOA, what are the additional financial burdens we're going to have because of this infrastructure if it's not sufficient for the existing units as well as phase 2 and these additional 7 units? What additional financial burden is this going to put on the existing residents? I also have a concern for potential owners. If this development is changing, what is the accommodations or what is the communication that's going to be to those potential owners that have purchased this townhome in a development that's under rezoning and being changed against their contract and what they have agreed to buy? We were shown that we were only going to have 95 units. Now it's going up to 102. There were promises and things that were made to us in the sales office about accesses and amenities that we were going to have, and now it looks in this proposal that those amenities and things of that nature are going to change. So for anybody that's a potential new owner, that could have a negative impact on what the community views in Tarpon Springs for this development. And I don't want to see that happen to other people because there's no way that they're going to know about these changes. So I'm very concerned about that. As far as the wetlands go, I'm a little concerned with the easement or the lack thereof, because it looks to me, as an untrained person, that some of those units are going to be built on that wetlands. And what happens if those buildings sink? And what are the liabilities to the homeowners and the HOA association if there's a problem with that building or those buildings and those structures with that encroachment? As well as I saw a tortoise impact. Has anyone done a study on other animals that live in those cypress ponds? Are there any sandhill cranes? We know that we have a barn owl. We have seen him on various occasions. So I would like to understand, not only are you considering the tortoise, but what other animals in that area are you considering? I have a real concern with the emergency-only access with 102 units and 2.4 cars coming through. All those roadways are private. All that sidewalk is private. Those are additional burdens on the HOA to repair and maintain those roadways as well as sidewalks. Thank you.
Good evening. Dan Duvall, 745 Grand Cypress. I'll make it quick. I know your time is valuable. I think the gentleman on the end here, I apologize, I don't have everybody's name memorized, but all the questions that he was arised during the discussion are exactly what I was going to sit here and go over. You guys already are ticking the right boxes. Manuel is a good-hearted guy. I think his intentions most of the time are pretty good, and I understand he's trying to make up some of the incurred loss, but I do implore you guys to come visit. If you get a chance, walk through. We don't want it to feel like a penitentiary when you're walking down just because all the units are crammed in. Right now, the biggest deal, we're no parking whatsoever. And now if you guys are sticking up signs that say no parking on the street, if my daughter comes to visit from college, I'm not sure where to tell her to park. You know, we didn't buy into this area because we didn't love it. We want to see Manuel be successful. I think the first plan he had, most of us might have gotten up and left if you said, hey, it's approved, let's just make sure all the wetlands and all the other things are taken care of. But seeing these additional units put in just really scare the heck out of everybody. And the last thing I think you guys need to think about, take a drive down that street. I've already had discussions with the city manager. He was very helpful getting stop signs put in, but that road is not designed to carry the volume of traffic it's carrying. So those are just things to think about, so thank you for your time.
Any other public comment? Have we received any correspondence, email or otherwise?
No, we haven't.
Okay, and I'm gonna, at this point in time, I'm gonna close the public comment, and briefly, Ben.
I'll remind everyone, the applicant does have a moment for a closing statement,
Yeah.
so will staff.
I appreciate the people that moved in there, I really do. I mean, they helped move the project along. Parking the project, Rich can tell you, it was designed according to the standard. We meet the parking requirement. My plan is to put an additional parking in phase 2. That's why I need phase 2. I'm gonna put it up against the property line there, probably 15, 20, 25 parking spots I can have over there. But I can't do it until I can start tearing everything down and start phase 2. That second access, the fire marshal doesn't require us to make that accessible, but if they want to make it accessible, I'm here to make people happy. I don't have a problem with that either. There'll be another third access that's not going to be accessible. But the fire marshal, he said, as long as we have an access down that main new road, that's all he needs, because he can go in and open it whenever he wants. He'll have a lock or whatever. So we are giving him an access. I talked about the recreational area. The parking spots, I'm prepared to put 15, 20, 30 parking spots over there. Okay, that was part of the plan. I can show that on the plan to make sure everybody sees it, so they don't think I'm just telling them what they want to hear. I mean, I'm prepared to put the parking spaces there. I'm prepared to put the dog park, the whole recreation area program over there. There's no houses underneath the power lines. It's 160 feet away from the power lines. So, I'm not a scientist or anything like that, but, I don't want to do a project where people are going to catch leukemia from it. I'm not doing intentions of that, but, and if you look at the prior plan versus the new plan, we're not adding more building pads to it. We're adding one lot on a couple here and there. And like I said, out of the 7 lots, there's only 3 that are in the wetland, and only parts of them. Okay, the other ones are landing on the upland part of the project. Okay, and that's all. I want to make everybody happy if I can. I mean, nobody. And, like I said, I'll put on the plan, recreation area, dog park, parking spaces. And we added that emergency lane for the fire marshal, but he didn't tell us he needed it open. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, just Rich Kelly. Just briefly, the parking and the driveway widths, which I hear is a little bit of a problem, they're up per code. It's not like we had a variance to reduce the driveway width or anything, and the 7 units that we're talking about, I've already described, Manuel did too, that only 3 of them are impacting the wetland. The other portion of the wetland impact would have to be made anyway, unless we didn't give them any backyards. The other additional units were made possible because we got rid of the cul-de-sac on the end, and now it's a T turnaround, which was okay to fire code. So it's still per code, which was able to lengthen the road a little bit and get more units in there and reconfigure.
I understand. I have a question. I understand the requirement for the second access, but is the fire marshal telling you that's going to be an exclusive access for fire?
We tried to get rid of it at first and just have the one access. Fire code specifically states we need a second emergency access only. So that's what we've done. Manuel just said we will make that a full access if that's what it takes to get this thing done.
So I guess I don't know if that answers my question. Did the fire marshal said they need an access exclusive to them?
No, they just, it didn't need to be exclusive to anybody other than them. I mean, it just needed something that they could get out with. It didn't need to be open to the public. But we'll open it to the public and have 2 full accesses.
If I may be so bold, Chair, I think without, because we didn't get a before and after on the original site plan, I think that their owners were told there were gonna be 2 accesses, but then there only was 1, and then the fire marshal said, no, you must have access for us, but the owners the whole time want 2 because there's too much traffic for 1. So
Right.
now they're gonna concede and go, okay, we'll go back to 2.
Exactly right.
But we're
So-
gonna take the cul-de-sac away on the other end. There's just so many changes that have made. I know that's not supposed to be a discussion, it's supposed to be a closing statement, I'm so sorry, but
No,
it's
that's okay.
it's so hard for us to keep up the changes that have been made from the original site plan to this current site plan, and we can feel that going around and around. And I'm gonna stop with that, please continue.
No, that's perfectly fine. And you nailed it. That's what we're gonna make the second access, so it's, that part of the plan is back to the original plan. The only main difference is there's no more cul-de-sac on the west end. It's just a few more units down there, and then obviously the wetland impacts that will all, like I said, will all be mitigated for plus. And there is I did hear one thing about endangered species and, the sandhill cranes or whatever. There is a endangered species report in there that describes what is and what isn't in the wetland.
That is correct. It also notes that the scientist recommends that there's a hand removal and relocation of all the gopher tortoise.
There was one burrow that was discovered. We have to find if it's actually active, and yes, it will be moved.
I have one brief question, if I may. So where would be the access point to the additional parking for the residents?
That would be in the very south end along the cemetery property. There's an access there now. It's just, it's for the industrial park or whatever. We would just leave that and make some spare parking.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Right, and then what I'm gonna do is between the buildings,
Restate your name, please.
Manuel Lindiakis, between the buildings, there's a 15-foot, I'm gonna put up paver sidewalk going into that easement so they could
Yeah,
park and
that
just
makes
walk to
sense.
wherever they're gonna go.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. Any other questions? We need, okay. Then let's go ahead and turn this over to the board for discussion.
I think everybody got closing statements since we, if I'm not mistaken, not to, but I think staff and this gentleman appears to have.
No, that's quite all right. William Conrad, the last point I want to make is that from the very inception, Phase 1 and Phase 2 comprised the development. They rely on each other, clearly. And some of the solutions that are required, many of them in Phase 2. So I want everyone just to remember the kind of the historic perspective and that this is one total development, although we have 2 phases and different methodologies for planning approval. But so thank you very much.
All right, now we can have board discussion.
Actually, I think there has to be a motion before.
Let me hear a motion.
Now that you've closed all the comments and closing statements, motion, second,
Yeah,
then
then
you
we
can
can have our
discuss.
discussion, correct. So,
And staff would ask, I've noted maybe 5 items that the applicant said that they were willing to change on the site plan. I would like to get clarification from the board whether those changes, whether you've noted those changes, whether you want them, accept them, what the status of those are.
And what are
with
the-
your motion.
What are the changes that you noted?
And applicant, please correct me if I heard anything wrong. I heard one of you say the second access would be open to the public. Okay. Are we offering to reduce some of the yards to reduce wetland impacts, or is that just, that was mentioned, but I don't know if that's actually a proposal? Okay. All right. additional parking on the south. Not sure how that's accessed and how you get to it, so
There's gonna be three entrances to the property. We'll keep that one closed. Just people that live there can get in and out, and that'll give you access to the parking spots.
okay, I would need to know where that third entrance is and how it works, so we'll make a note of that. But we can't review the standards for that until we see it. And then as far as the improvements in the easement, I'm not sure if the applicant can commit to specific improvements now, not knowing whether Duke Energy has purview over approving those and whether they will approve them. But I heard dog park and trail and a paver sidewalk to that easement. That's what you're going to pursue. Okay. That's all. Was there anything else offered?
I've been in touch with Duke Energy, and as long as they won't let us put a tennis court there, they won't let us put another swimming pool there. But fencing for dog park and paving and trails and stuff like that, they don't have a problem.
Okay, this could go on forever. Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Please do.
Yeah, I'm going to preface this motion is that I genuinely appreciate everyone who came and shared their thoughts, from the applicant to the residents to staff. I just want to do a preface is that I do appreciate and have listened to staff that there is some good parts of this project, but obviously there have been some things that haven't gone quite right, and I think it's painfully obvious that this preliminary site plan is incomplete a whole bunch of ways. Therefore, Chair, I am going to motion that we deny as submitted application 21-133 rezoning and preliminary plan development approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, let's have a discussion.
They're going to want to chat, and this is going to be private between us, and I just want to thank Pat for clarifying some of those conversational items, that those are all good things and would get this a lot closer, but those are all just words. And until they're put down in the application and detailed carefully, that also addresses all the current residents' concerns in the TRC that you carefully tried to get them to understand, is that obviously the city has got concerns about the current state of the development, much less giving a whole new wave that might have the same challenges. And I'll be a little bit firmer to listening to the residents, is that the waivers, frankly, some of those should probably be off the table. There is a reason that there's a 2-foot staggered waiver, because one of the residents said we don't want to look like we're in a penitentiary. There's a reason that those things are part of the plan, and we're kind of waiving that, perhaps would waive them away where we might regret that at a later date. That would be the end of my discussion.
Yeah, one of the things, and I think I prefaced it with this still Swift Mud application still pending, is we don't know what the Swift Mud comments are going to be. And so if you move forward and Swift Mud has comments that change the site plan, you know, that's why I question, and I know, Pat, what you indicated is that's not required, but it's beneficial to this board to find out when somebody's making application that the site plan is consistent with what Swift Mud may require, and not approve something just to go back to a drawing board and amend the site plan to take in consideration what Swift Mud's requirements might be.
That's right. And we've had this conversation, is we're being asked to approve something and we don't know everything.
Yeah,
and I'll go one step farther, if I may, in regards to Duke and the easement, is that there are easements that could be granted that would be in perpetuity forever to the HOA that says, yes, HOA, you do get to use this land. And sure, they might only have an easement without getting that discussion. They need to be provided that as fact forever, recorded document as part of the HOA document.
Well, the property belongs to the developer. The easement basically gives Duke Energy the right to access and use that property. It doesn't preclude the owner from utilizing his property subject to the requirements of
That is true. As someone that unfortunately reads a lot of easements, such as you do, each one is specific to
Yeah.
itself.
So-
It has its own verbiage and language, and it might say some things that maybe someone isn't aware of.
Yeah, I think Mr. Lindiakis would be correct that I couldn't see Duke Energy objecting to utilizing the property for those particular purposes. They just don't want to see construction or overuse that impact their ability to access it. But that being said, there was a motion and a second. Are there any other concerns of this board, or any further discussion that would help?
My only
in this
concern on
process?
that is the agreements that were at the beginning. There was agreements that were made that were actually promised to everybody that was saying that this was the development, this was what's gonna happen, and then coming in, they're saying this was all approved prior. And then now they're wanting to make changes, but they're still wanting to go back on but it was approved before. So I don't think that that's a fair assessment to anybody, especially the people that have already bought into the complex.
Yeah. I can understand their concern about the number of units. Certain items in the development are really not this board's purview. It may be issues they may have with a developer or something but at the end of the day, we approve, we're approving a site plan. And, if something's not working in the development, that's the developer's purview, not ours. But taking your concerns, I understand. So other than having any further discussion, we had a motion, we had a second. So at this,
If staff may be recognized, I do have one clarification.
yeah.
It was mentioned on the Water Management District review. So if the preliminary, whatever plan layout is approved, if something is approved on preliminary plan development, if I did say that the city can't require those permits, that's true. But if the permits come back with a different layout, they would have to come back to you with the revised preliminary plan development. Remember, the final or site plan phase has to match exactly what was approved in preliminary. So just a clarification for you that it would have to come back to you.
So we're really not telling the applicant no, we're just telling the applicant that they need to come back with
Actual plan,
yeah.
a laid out plan.
So we have a first, we have a second. Unless there's further discussion, I'd like to call for a vote.
Ms. Vehil?
Yes.
Yes, for what? For
For
his
the
motion?
denial.
The
Okay.
motion's to deny, so yes would be denying
Okay.
the,
Bessie?
Yes.
Mr. Stavropoulos?
I say yes.
Mr. Kouskoudis?
Yes. At this point in time, I turn the gavel back over, and I'm gonna ask for a 5-minute.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break, and we'll pick it back up at, say 9:10. All right, everyone, we're back. So that brings us to application 20-150. That's a proposed site plan approval for Gemini storage on the northeast corner of Safford and Mears Boulevard. Do we have a staff report, please?
Yes. This is a site plan approval for Gemini storage. This is located on the corner of Mears Boulevard and Safford Avenue. I don't think I have a real detailed map of what's around it, but basically the plaza's commercial here along Alt 19. Just north of it is a basically a construction yard company that has a construction yard there. They're single family up on Lincoln Avenue, and then, of course, Mears Boulevard and the old landfill and wetlands south of that. This is for site plan approval for Gemini storage to store boats and recreational vehicles on about 1.5 acres total. The uncovered outdoor storage is for up to 72, actually I think that's 73 boats and RVs. This is in the intensive business zoning district, the commercial general future land use map category. This shows the basic site plan presented by the applicant. The site had some wetland fill, illegal wetland fill impacts that occurred prior to the current owner purchasing the property. And the owner has been working with the Southwest Florida Water Management District on that issue. And this, they have put on the plans representation of where that old jurisdictional line was. So this area shaded in green is the impact area that's been filled. The rest of this area is wetland with a little bit of uplands, kind of creating an island in there in the remaining wetlands. The access to the project will be from Safford Avenue. There is an existing city drainage facility here along South Safford. The applicant proposes to culvert that driveway to accommodate that drainage. Our city drainage staff have looked at the project and approved the proposal for the project and for the driveway. The applicant then proposes to fence the project with a solid fence on Safford and on Lincoln. There would be no access for the public on Lincoln.
Pat, I'm sorry, when you mean solid fence, is that an opaque fence?
Yes.
Or, okay.
Opaque fence. And then a chain link fence up here on the north side. There would be parking lot buffer surrounding the parking lot on the three sides here inside the fences. On the south, the applicant proposes to do some upland buffer, which we'll see in a minute, some planting in this area. And there is no fence proposed for the south side. Just to kind of point out, the applicant has proposed regular parking spaces here. We'll talk about those in a minute. So we have regular, customer parking spaces, one handicapped, and then some others here that will be paved. The rest of the property will be the existing surface, which is a crushed concrete and overgrown with grass, basically. The applicant proposes to put parking stops. We did require parking stops for the spaces, and then the spaces are to be delineated with, I guess, bollards that have a chain between them. I haven't received a kind of a picture of what that would look like, but that's the proposal. Just a notation, The city has asked the applicant if they would grant a 20-foot drainage easement along the south side of the property. That is kind of an issue that's outside and beyond this site plan approval. That's not something that is a part of this request or a part of the city's requirements. That's a separate kind of item, the standalone item, but the applicant has shown it on the site plan. This is just an overlay on the aerial photograph of that site plan. And then this is showing the buffer area that the applicant proposes to plant with pine trees, cordgrass, and wiregrass. And the applicant has proposed that this would achieve 90% opacity at 6 feet in height within 1 year. There are some native plants here. There is a lot of Brazilian pepper here, which the city would require to have removed. So that is the proposal for that. The tree list for the rest of the property includes the hollies, cypress, and the sweet bay. This just shows a little bit of the previous condition of the property. I did take a quick look at some of the water management documents, and they do consider that this was a wooded wetland. So they are working with the water management to mitigate for wooded wetland impacts. This was the property in about 2018, and I didn't put it on the slideshow, but the applicant did include an aerial photograph in their exhibits, and we have their plan sets here of really this same aerial, except you can see there's a lot of truck parking. I'm not sure if that was associated with this northern development extending down or not, but there was previous parking and storage of vehicles on the site. You can see that in various aerials going through the years. These are just some ground photographs of the site where this is a chain link fence with shade cloth on it, 6 feet in height. So that shows you what a 6-foot fence would look like. That's on the property now. This is looking from South Safford Avenue. Again, from South Safford, that fence ends here. It's probably about where the new fence would end. So with all this pepper removed, it would be easy to see the property from this area and from Mears Boulevard, which is over here. This just shows some of the surface. It's very overgrown now. It's getting overgrown with grass. You can still see some of the gravel, crushed, compacted gravel on the site. So staff reviewed this for site plan compliance with the site plan standards, of which there are 4. I think there's just the 4. Yeah. Compliance with the applicable provisions of Land Development Code and with the comprehensive plan. I'll kind of take those together. So this is in the commercial general category, which talks about all kinds of different uses. As you know, commercial general covers like Highway 19, a lot of Alt 19, those types of areas. It talks about a variety then of uses, including things like outdoor storage, some intensive business uses. But it also talks about screening and compatibility of those heavier uses. Now, the intensive business district that this property is in does contemplate outdoor storage of vehicles, but not as a use by right. Things like motor pools and fleet parking lots are listed under intensive business, but as a conditional use, the applicant is asking for a use by right. Boat and RV storage is not a use that is listed in our land development code at all. So it's something we probably need to add. But the characteristics of it, the facilities impacts, the operation, vehicular trips, those types of things most resemble a warehouse or a mini warehouse type of use. So that's how staff, those are kind of the standards that staff applies. We have had this use come before you before, and we have had requests, a lot of requests actually in town for this use, and inquiries for this use. And we have required or asked the applicant, I will say we've advised the applicant that we would like to see these storage, boat and RV storage properties covered or enclosed. The applicant declined to do that. Obviously, it's not a strict code citation for RV boat storage. You must enclose or cover. We're trying to review this in the context of the zoning and of the commercial general land use category, asking for land use compatibility and appropriate screening of some of these more less attractive uses. This is at the corner of Mears and Safford. The trail is there. It's the gateway to the city. Manatee Plaza is being redone, as you know. With the exception of the property to the north, which is, you know, a construction company, so it's a little messier, and it is enclosed, it is fenced. It's really a residential and retail and commercial area. So this was one that we just couldn't get there with comprehensive plan consistency and zoning, the zoning district consistency. Otherwise, in the zoning code, we did have some issues with the parking plan, standards not being met, and the screening standards. We feel that the south side probably needs to be screened. The 90% opacity in 1 year with just the pines and wiregrass is probably not going to be sufficient for what's being stored there. So we're looking at those items. We asked for an opaque fence of 8 feet. The applicant declined to do that. So those are some of the code and comprehensive plan issues. The other issue with the comprehensive plan is, like the last item you just heard, the city does require that mitigation for wetland impacts be done on site first. If that's not possible, then within the city, within the planning area. If that's not possible, then we go off site. This applicant is going to be mitigating by going off site to buy mitigation bank credits. But the analysis just has not been presented. We've asked for it to explain why the first 2 options aren't feasible. Without that analysis, we could not provide the basis or rationale for you to waive that requirement, to overcome that requirement. As far as concurrency management, the project does meet level of service standards and it can be served by the city. And it is expected to meet all other building codes. And I can provide specifics on the parking and the screening, more of those if you desire to have those as to what we asked for and what we would think would be the minimum needed. But at this time, staff is recommending denial of the site plan as proposed by the applicant because it does not meet the intent of the commercial general future land use map category. It doesn't comply with the comprehensive plan with respect to providing that wetland mitigation analysis. It doesn't meet the intent of the warehouse use in the intensive business zoning district, and it doesn't comply with the parking and screening standards. And I have provided for you at the beginning of the report a list of conditions should you wish to approve the project as presented by the applicant. And we have a list of 14 conditions if you wish to do that. Those are listed on these next two slides. We can go over those now, or if you want to deliberate first and see if you want to look at those other conditions. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Do we have questions for staff?
I have two short questions, please, and thank you. Pat, thank you for that presentation.
You're welcome.
You've already helped me once, but on site plan review criteria, intent of warehouse use permitted by right not met. I had wrote elaborate, but I think that you did. The idea is that it's supposed to have a warehouse on it, not just parking, or storage, excuse me.
For a use by right, yeah, so,
By right
yeah.
would be a warehouse.
Yeah, or at least, we have approved one in the past that was covered with open sides.
Okay.
That was one up on Rainville Road. I don't know if it was a couple of years ago. I'm not sure if you remember that one. But it was kind of a nicely designed, covered, like a warehouse without the walls type thing. So we would have accepted that.
And that's a function of the category of the intensive business commercial use.
And the fact that it's requested as a permitted use by right.
Okay.
To go a little further with that, they could have requested a conditional use, but, I mean, you said the boat and RV storage is not specifically listed in our code,
No.
but it would be similar to other outdoor storage that is mentioned in our code, I mean, should they have gone for a conditional use permit, since it's not permitted by right?
They could have. We've, normally processed all these because the characteristics of it are like a warehouse or mini warehouse as far as the impacts, the traffic, the parking requirement, all that. The only difference, if they had come in for conditional use, they'd have to show compatibility. So whether it's covered or not, and I will tell you, we had that comment. This is one that did go to TRC 6 times, I believe. And we had that comment a couple times. Staff relented on that comment, trying to get some other design criteria to make up for that, to make it compatible. So the compatibility issue would still exist. Even if it were a conditional use, we'd still be looking for something that is a little cleaner, a little more screened, and a little more contained as far as the parking. There's no containment of the parking lot, things like that.
I'm sorry, I have just one more question. It's a clarification on the wetland impact area and the historical swift mud boundary or line. Is I'm understanding is that the previous owner filled in some wetlands without permission, and now this owner's being held accountable for that?
Yes, a previous owner.
A previous owner filled in a historical wetland area. It happens. And now it's being brought to light, and
I'm not sure when it was brought to light, but the current owner, well, I won't say anymore. I'll just say someone sold them something that may or may not have already been identified as a violation.
Okay. But
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure I was kind of understanding that right,
And
because
the
it doesn't
applicant
say
may be able
that
to address that.
clearly, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
now that's what it is.
It happens, like you said.
Right. And so Swift Mud has got a say in how that's going to get fixed, because protecting wetlands, of course, is important. Okay, those are my two questions. Thank you.
Just You had mentioned it being a gateway, and obviously, the property north of that site is an eyesore as well. But that property's been sort of grandfathered in with regard to any requirements for, you know, opaque fencing and all that that we would require. I'm not trying to change the subject, but
Yeah.
I don't want to set a double standard where we allow, you know.
That property's existing.
Yeah.
The use is grandfathered in,
Okay.
yes.
I see here the parking lot design standards not met item. Is that something where they really should be requesting variances for the deviation from those standards?
Trying to remember if Board of Adjustment can grant, but I'd have to look that up. I'm not sure they can grant variances to parking standards, if you can get one.
Yeah.
But they could. The issues, and I can identify those. So the drainage has been approved. The applicant, it's not real clear to planning staff what's going to happen with the surface. The main thing for drainage is the applicant has stated that the topography will not change, so the elevations will not change. They have stated that there'd be the existing crushed concrete would be used and that grass would be retained where feasible, but it would be mechanically raked. So in my mind, I think what is being proposed is to rake it and have crushed gravel on it. The applicant can address that. I'm still not sure what the final surface will be. This area down here is not contained. Migration over time and extra parking of RVs, boats in this upland area, buffer area is a concern that planning staff has. That could be resolved either by a fence along here or some type of curb is what we asked for. We did ask for parking stops, and the applicant did provide parking stops for all the spaces. Based on using the mini storage parking standard, because we don't have one, which is very minimal parking standard, the applicant needs 7 spaces. There are 5 spaces, the handicap being the 5th one, that appear to meet the standard. These 2 are for compact, but we don't have a provision for compact spaces for this use. There are no employees on site, so these do not comply. The parking standard requires striped or marked parking spaces. In this case, the applicant is proposing these chains to be moved around. That is probably acceptable. But yeah, so those were the items, the parking items that we did note.
So I'm going to inject a little levity. So what is essentially a parking lot is deficient in parking spaces.
Well,
It's a little levity there. It's a little parking humor there. Sorry.
I have a question, if I may ask.
yes.
Looking at item 4, on what is the purpose for the applicant to provide engineering for a lift station that conforms with city regulations on an open parking lot?
They will be providing pump out for the RVs.
Oh,
And they can elaborate on how that's going to work and
thank you.
what they're providing. That's why the foot-operated valve and that.
All right, any further?
I missed that before. Thank you so much, Jim. Is that RV as in big RV, so there's got to be a type of septic drainage, sewer
Exactly.
drainage system, and then therefore a pump station.
Exactly, yeah.
So there's a lift, they approve a lift station, so they
Yeah.
can use it as.
That's for the big RVs.
Oh, for the big stuff. I was thinking small boats and trucks. Shame
No,
on
that's
me.
what I thought too.
Okay.
All right, if there's no further questions for staff, would the applicant like to make a presentation?
Hi, my name is David Fuchsen with the engineering firm of Fuchsen Engineering. Richard Kelly, engineer you're familiar with, will be assisting me in this presentation. I would like to clarify a couple things before we get into some details. My clients did their due diligence in 2018. They met with the city staff, and at that time they were told there were no violations on the site, city-related, and they were also talked about the proposed use as storage, and the city seemed to indicate that it would be acceptable. There was no mention of putting a roof on the site. And at that time, they hired an engineer, started down the process, started encountering a bunch of obstacles, and after a couple of years of frustration, they hired my firm, and I've been involved in it a couple of years now, and some of these issues that are coming up were just brought up within the last, I'd say 8 months or so of this 4-year ordeal. But particularly the covering over the parking spaces. I don't recall it ever coming up until about 8 months ago. As far as the parking being deficient, we have 7 paved spaces, which is what's required. The compact, they're not really compact in the width, they're compact in the depth. And these are 7 paved parking spaces for 1 employee to come to the site periodically, and for people who want to pick up their boats or their RVs and use them and then bring them back. We really think that 7 is overkill, but that's what the city staff asked for, and that's what we provided. As far as the surface, this site, over like 20 years, this site has been altered. Wetlands have been filled. Construction debris has been brought in. So it's so hard that the soils firm had to use this special equipment to penetrate it to like a 3 or 4 foot depth and then gave up. So any questions about the durability of the surface, it's just not rational. The owner to the north, the trucking company, used to own the site, and they have stored trucks on the site for a number of years. I have an aerial that's part of the plans. It's sheet 2 of the plans, I believe. Actually, sheet 3. If you like, I could pass out the aerial to you. You could see that clearly there's semis and trailers on the site. And they didn't appear to have any problems negotiating the site. Thank you very much. As far as the buffers and the fencing and things of that sort, the travel lane for Safford and for Mears is at least 200 feet from any of the places that will have an RV or boat. That's a substantial spatial buffer. And that's why we contend that a 6-foot fence, opaque fence on the west boundary is adequate, and an 8-foot fence is not going to do any good. It's more prone to be knocked down during a severe wind, and we think that the 6-foot fence with trees and other types of vegetation is going to provide adequate buffering from the motoring public on Safford. As far as Mears, we're planting pine trees in our buffer. And the city is going to be doing a beautification plan along the north edge of Safford as Safford is completed. And we think that, plus those plantings, plus a spatial buffer from the traveling public on the road of Mears is adequate. People aren't going to be seeing an eyesore as they drive by. We're willing to add a curb along the edge of the pavement closest to the wetland on the south side to prevent people from driving and parking south of the aisle. And as Patricia pointed out, they asked for wheel stops for the parking all the parking, but particularly the spaces that were adjacent to the wetland. And that'll prevent people from parking outside the designated areas. Regarding the off-site mitigation selection, our environmental scientists had discussions with First off, the SwiftMud issue caught us all by surprise. After I was hired, the client got a letter from EPC saying you have not done anything about the violation that was issued to the previous owner, and we're going to start fines if you don't start a plan to take care of this issue. And we go, wait a second, this is not of record, it was never recorded, which SwiftMud doesn't do that. So how in the world would a buyer know that there's a previous violation unless we would go to all the agencies, DEP, SwiftMud, the Corps of Engineers, and they said, well, it should have been part of your due diligence. I've been in this business a long time, and I've never had a client do that kind of due diligence. It's usually the seller brings it to the buyer's attention, but in this instance, the seller did not do that. So we've inherited a problem, and we're working through it. But SwiftMud doesn't want, in general, small, piecemeal wetland mitigation areas. They're difficult to maintain. SwiftMud doesn't want thousands and thousands of mitigation reports coming into their offices every quarter. And they would rather have these larger mitigation sites if that is appropriate. And SwiftMud and our environmental scientists felt like it was appropriate to do off-site mitigation. And we've tried to convince the city that this is the best way, and we didn't know that they were still upset until we got the staff report. It just does not seem feasible to have on-site mitigation for this site. Well, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Richard, and he can perhaps address some other issues that may come up.
Back again. Rich Kelly.
Can you state your address or your?
490 Kirkland Circle, Dunedin, Florida,
Thank you.
34698. 4 points of denial Pat showed on that slide up there. 2 of them were zoning problems that basically arise because you don't really have a category for open storage to fit into. The other 2, one was the wetland issue. As you know, it's an old violation. It's probably 15 or 20 years old. So it's not just the previous owner, it's an owner from that long ago that we're being stuck with. Because or else the wetland should be where it is now, not way up there. So we're asking because of that, we're asking for a little levity and not have to mitigate on site. It just wouldn't be feasible that much area to mitigate on site. And that's why another reason why we want to go buy the credits. And the other one was the parking, and they've touched on that one anyways. We have the 7 spaces. If one was short, it goes to a different one instead, but that's the long and short of it. I mean, the main thing here, I think, is the explanation of why we're asking for buying credits mitigation credits as opposed to mitigating on-site, and that's the main reason, is because it's from an old owner, we didn't know about it, and it takes up a quarter of the site, and we need to buy off-site mitigation instead of mitigate for that. And we just want the break on that because we're taking on somebody else's problem. That's really all I have, unless you have any questions.
Does the board have any questions?
My understanding with regard to the wetland mitigation is that y'all were looking to go off-site to purchase mitigation credits, but y'all haven't presented any plan to staff with regard to that.
But that's what I'm
our
explaining right now.
comment was.
Yeah. I'm just getting involved in this, but that's my explanation, is that we're taking on somebody's problem from 20 years ago, and so we're asking the city for its levity. And
I know that site real well, and trust me, I can understand and appreciate the issues that you have at that site with regard to wetland mitigation, but I think staff was pretty clear that said, that's doable for off-site mitigation credits, but that wasn't even, I don't think there was a plan presented to the staff with regard to that.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Am I correct, Pat?
Are you asking if we were presented with a plan for offsite?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so we weren't presented with the applicants stated that they would be mitigating off-site by buying credits in a mitigation bank. And we asked for the analysis of the first two options. We did get one response at one point that said on-site wetland creation is not, there's no room for it. I mean, you know, a biologist's analysis of there's no mitigation available in the city. We couldn't do a scrape down for because the value of the wetland compensation wasn't going to work because of how many acres or how many square feet you'd have to create. That's what we were looking for, and we just didn't get it. They may be perfectly, you know, okay that it wasn't feasible on site or in the city. We just did not receive that.
And we move forward from this, we can certainly put that in writing because that's exactly the long and short of it, other than, you know, we're inheriting somebody else's problem. We can't do anything with it because they mentioned that and then even the environmentalists tried to dig. You can't get through that to find out what's below it. And if you can't get through it, we don't know if it's a viable source of available mitigation. So we have to have to go off-site for this, or bank credits.
Y'all had a chance to look at the staff recommendations that they've listed. What are the staff recommendations? Are you saying that those would not be acceptable to you?
The 14 points?
Yes.
I believe we'd accept pretty much all those 14 points. I know we talked about an 8-foot fence in lieu of a 6-foot fence in the front, and Dave touched on that as well. I don't think that extra 2 feet is going to do anything except for end up with a dilapidated fence in a few years. What I would rather see is maybe even a second row of taller
Vegetation.
trees that we're putting there. The cypress trees, there's 3 cypress trees, you know, maybe another 2 row in the front instead of the 8-foot fence. And if they were 8 feet tall, they would provide a better screening, better looking area than just the fence in the front. And then along the south, you know, I agree, we're several hundred feet away, nobody's going to see that. And then when the Mears Boulevard gets extended, the city's going to beautify that anyways.
I'm done.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Okay.
Seeing none, do we have any members of the public wishing to speak on this? Seeing none, do we have any letters in regard to this?
No, we don't.
In that case, I guess we need a motion so we can discuss.
I'll make a motion to approve the application subject to the following changes. To adopt the staff recommendations, with the exception of instead of an 8-foot fence, a 6-foot fence, but have that 6-foot fence, opaque fence, not just along Safford, but along Mears as well. That the, I think let's see, approval of final wetland mitigation. And obviously, they already put that in there, the approval of wetland mitigation. So that's already addressed my concern.
Could I get a clarification of that? So you said have the 6-foot opaque fence go along Mears? Is that what you're saying? The south side?
Yeah, yes, the
Okay.
south, yes.
Thank you.
In other words, wherever the road, the road is visible from the driver, that fence be installed, opaque fence.
Can I ask a question about that?
We're not they're in well, you're not in discussion
I-
yet, so it's up to
I
the chair.
just wanted to clarify something
Yeah.
about what MERS is.
It's up to the chair. You're not in discussion yet, so if you're okay with him clarifying, it's fine.
Uh,
Well, you're still making a motion, right?
Yep,
Yeah,
Yeah, he hasn't quite finished it yet.
Okay.
so,
yeah, I guess since we haven't really officially started deliberations, you
Okay, I can ask.
make
You-
a quick point.
You say Mears Boulevard, you talking about the open Mears Boulevard or the Mears Boulevard paper right-of-way that the road doesn't exist yet? Because the south side, there's no road on the south side. It's a future road that the city will build.
along your
So
property line.
you want to screen it, but there's no road there to screen from.
You haven't been there in a long time, the road's built.
Is it built already? Yeah. Oh, was it built on Google Earth the other day?
If staff may interject, staff had asked that if they do fence, that they fence along the parking lot. If that's acceptable, that's kind of what we would like to see.
Are you saying fence the four sides of the property? Is that what the city staff had recommended, or just along the Safford?
Along, the applicant has fencing proposed at the borders of the parking lot on the east and west sides. Staff would like to see that fence continued around the border of the parking lot along the south side, because the property line may be in wetlands. I'm not sure the actual property line is what the status of it is. But the idea is to screen at least from staff's perspective, the storage. So there will be, the applicant also will, I believe, still be planting the upland buffer that they have to plant for water management. Is that true?
Yeah, that's correct.
Which
All
would be
that-
outside the fence.
Yeah,
All that area would be planted
yeah,
between the Mears right-of-way and the parking.
Yeah, in other words, what I'm saying is, there's a difference between a fence and an opaque fence, and at a minimum, the opaque fence along Safford and an opaque fence along Mears. Because you have to fence in your storage facility anyways. I mean, I think that's no-brainer that you have to secure your storage
That's the
facility.
point. They
Yeah,
want
I mean,
room.
ordinarily, we didn't think it was necessary along a wetland, but.
Right, and staff, and since we're completely off your motion, what staff was suggesting is they're concerned that the parking is gonna
But save discussion,
encroach and exceed onto everything.
save discussion until we have a motion. So let's go back to trying to get our motion.
Yeah, want to pick up the motion, Mike?
I'll pick up the motion, okay? The staff recommendations, except when it comes to fencing, that the property be fenced, but at a minimum, there's got to be an opaque fence along the Safford and Mears corridor.
Okay, got it.
But you specified a specific height.
6 foot.
6 foot.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
All right. Let's have some discussion.
I think the staff's recommendations are not unreasonable. I guess the only deviation for me was the height of the fence. You know, it sure would look a lot better than the property north of that, and hopefully that may be a suggestion to the property owner north of that, that they probably need to install an opaque fence as well.
Well, I don't think an 8-foot fence will help that property at all, because you
No.
got double containers over each
Yeah,
other.
but at least some
like
type
a
of opaque. 'cause-
hodgepodge
Yeah,
of
but
things.
we can't, unfortunately, that's not for us to decide.
I still have some concern about the use permitted by right question and the inconsistency with the future land use policy and coastal management policy, though, as well.
Are we making this more of a conditional use by putting these criteria in? Because if it was a use by right,
Yeah, we wouldn't,
we would be adding these requirements.
yeah.
I share the chairperson's concerns, and I'm just gonna read it out loud. Staff recommends denial of the site plan due to the fact it does not meet the intent of the commercial general future land use. It's not like it kinda misses it, it just doesn't meet it.
But we don't have anything.
Okay, I'm not gonna disagree, I'm just gonna read what's there. Does not comply with a wetland mitigation analysis requirement. She said, hey, we want A, B, and as a last resort, C, and they went right to C and said, nah, it's too tough to do that other thing. And I'm completely understand the situation, I don't know how to say empathetic. As someone in the construction industry, I often meet homeowners they're new homeowners that are burdened with homes that had work that was unpermitted or is in violation, and they didn't ask, and the people didn't tell. It's unfortunate, it happens all the time, it's out there, it's just how the world works, and just to say it's too tough, frankly, is not a good answer in me.
But in the staff recommendations, there actually is a requirement that they get final wetland mitigation approval. How they do it, if you look at number 10.
Okay, and I'll go with that, thank you. Right now, it says it does not comply.
Yeah, so how they do it is what they have to do to
And this
satisfy staff.
this other one's kind of tough. It does not meet the intent of the warehouse use in the intensive business zoning district, and you and other would agree that that other property that's adjacent is grandfathered, and regretfully so, and that it's terrible, so we're just adding to the problem, because that's not what's supposed to be there.
What's supposed to be there?
A warehouse intensive business use.
But we have nothing that in our, that satisfies, or in our development plan that allows the type of use. Am I correct? What you
Well, if they submitted for a warehouse, they would have it by right.
They should have submitted a conditional use.
There's not a conditional use for this type of use.
There's not a use by right for this type of use either.
I would politely disagree. If this was for a warehouse or for intensive business as it's intended, we wouldn't be having this discussion. But they want to put RV storage a place where it's not really allowed. That's the end. Those are my concerns. I would agree that I think it's kind of black and white. Unless I'm misunderstanding that.
Well,
Let me ask staff, are there zoning classifications where this use is appropriate or is approved?
Boat and RV storage is not specifically called out anywhere in the code. So the reason that staff likened this to a warehouse or a mini warehouse is because you have people that are leaving an item there, and they would come back and obviously get it to use it, take it out, just like a mini storage facility. They aren't, obviously, we've coordinated with the applicant. People aren't going to be doing work on the RVs or washing the RVs on site or any of that. The conditional uses, for example, in this category, the fleet pool, motor pool type thing or something like that would have a lot more traffic associated with it, activity associated with it. This use is not likened to those other than their vehicles that are stored outdoors.
there's no box that this fits in, is what you're saying.
Yeah, so, so this was allowed to be reviewed by right because basically the facilities and activity impacts weren't really, really are comparable to a warehouse. Where staff runs into issues is just the neighborhood compatibility of, the conditions that are proposed on the site, basically.
So if it's a use by right, there'd be no conditions, correct?
Oh, no, we condition
conditions-
site plans all the time, as you know. This
Well-
is a site plan, it's a use by right, meaning
You're right.
there's no notice to the public other than your agenda.
Okay.
And there's no requirement for them to go through those 7 criteria, one of them which is compatibility with the neighborhood. The compatibility issue comes in here because the comprehensive plan wants outdoor storage and commercial general to be compatible with the neighborhood. So that's why that issue has been introduced. It's not taken on its face in this commercial general category that an outdoor storage type use is immediately compatible with the neighborhood as it would normally be. A warehouse is a good example of something that's allowed by right. It's enclosed. There's no compatibility issue. It's not something, it'd be accepted as compatible by right.
But
So-
we're putting conditions on this, in essence, correct?
You can put conditions on it.
Well, the city staff has made recommendations for conditions.
Yes,
Okay.
so what we've done is if you would like to approve this as presented by the applicant, these are the recommended conditions
So,
that address some of the outstanding issues and some of the compatibility issues. You can add to these, take some away, change them, whatever you'd like to recommend if you're looking at an approval.
so basically, this does not fit in any box that we have. And staff has reviewed this and said, look, if you do recommend approval, these are the conditions we want in place.
That's correct.
Okay, so would this be considered a conditional use?
No. These are conditions of a site plan approval.
Okay, any further discussion? Let's call for a vote then.
Ms. Vehil?
Yes.
Mr. Vesey?
No.
Mr. Stavropoulos?
Yes.
Mr. Kouskoudis?
Yes.
Mr. Seaman?
No. All right, motion carries. And I've hidden my agenda from myself.
Here
Here it is, I got it.
Thank you very much for considering this.
All right, item number 5, rules of procedure. It's a resolution approving the change of our meeting time from 7 PM to 6:30 PM. Can we have a quick staff report?
Yes, so I've provided to each of you a proposed revision of the rules of procedure. If you look on page 2, you'll see the change proposed for the regular meeting time to 6:30. And then I corrected 2 typos that were in your rules, one on page 6 and one on page 7. If you adopt this resolution this evening, you would be able to start with your 6:30 time for your next meeting.
I make a motion, we approve.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Can we have a roll call?
Ms. Vehil?
Yes.
Mr. Vesey?
Yes.
Mr. Stavropoulos?
Yes.
Mr. Kouskoudis?
Yes.
Mr. Seaman?
Yes. All right, do we have staff comments?
Yes, so your next meeting is actually on March 28th. Just a reminder, you were bumped a week ahead by the Board of Commissioners, and that will start at 6:30. And second item is, we did have a request from Mr. Seaman for a Planning and Zoning Board workshop. And so we would be looking at April at the earliest to set a date for a workshop. And I wanted to get you all's feedback on whether we could provide some date choices now, or whether you'd like to email me, and then I'd be coordinating with the IT staff and city staff to set that up. Mr. Seaman, I believe you asked, did it necessarily have to be in this room? Not necessarily. We could possibly use the media room upstairs. I can look into that. Some of the boards use that room. It's a good room.
Yeah, I'd rather be around a conference table for this, where it's a little more informal. And
Okay, we could use that, or one of the conference rooms. So would you like to talk about potential dates today, this evening, or would you like to just email me? Or I could email you a list of available dates that other boards are not meeting that would be open. And I think you were going to ask whether a daytime or an evening meeting was preferred.
I think that was the one thing we do need to ask for sure, is since this is a one-time thing, for the benefit of staff, if it could be daytime, they wouldn't have to have another nighttime meeting in that case. But if anybody can't be there for a one-time daytime meeting, we'll have to do it at night.
Okay. And we do have two board members that are not here this evening, so
Yeah.
if you'd like, I'll email you the dates available in April for daytime or nighttime, I guess, if that's what you want to do. And then we'll try to settle on an available date and go from there.
The topics of discussion, and we'll come up with an agenda, but the idea was to talk about some of the things that we've had problems with in the last 6-8 months on projects, and begin to develop an agenda of things for the new city commission to be able to maybe make some changes in our ordinances to avoid some of the things we've had problems with in the future.
Okay, great.
Okay, I do have one question, not to delay our adjournment, but a couple weeks ago that we had that joint, I guess, meeting with the different city boards.
Mm-hmm.
What is the outcome of that, or you know, I know we had an opportunity to vet
Mm-hmm.
and vent, but is there any outcome of that at this point?
Yes, there will be. I think what's happening right now is that we're kind of regrouping. I think we'll be coming back to some of the individual, boards individually. And frankly, I think part of the strategy now is to slow down at least for a month or so and wait for the election to play out so that we can get people focused. That's kind of the feeling we got from all the workshops, including the public workshop we held that Saturday, was just to regroup, talk with some of you and any other boards individually, and approach it that way. So we've gone back to the consultant. We've expressed kind of, our feeling on how those went, and hopefully we'll be getting a revised kind of new strategy to tackle those again. We did get a lot of good feedback and comments from those workshops, and that will be used.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, and one final question. Will the city furnish refreshments during our workshop?
He already brought them.
All right.
I'll eat anything at this point.
Was that strategic planning job? Yeah.
Should I answer that?
I just want to make sure I go with it.
nothing else, I guess we're adjourned.
Not guilty.